Chapter 171. On the other hand, Yang Yi held Xishi's little hand and led her into the kindergarten. Welcome, little sister. There were 2 rows of female teachers standing at the door. They were all smiling and clapping their hands. They were full of enthusiasm as soon as they came up. Perhaps affected by the lively atmosphere, Xishi also took her father's hand. She walked a little cheerfully and looked around curiously. After a while, they walked past the teacher's welcome. The little girl couldn't wait to pull her father's hand and ask him to squat down and whisper to her. Papa, I think it's fun here. The little girl's lips were red and her teeth were white. She looked so cute when she blinked her big eyes and smiled. Yang Yi scratched his head. Is it fun? Before he came, he was worried that Xishi would cry. He thought of countless tricks in his heart, and even looked up some information. He could almost write a 1,000-word paper on how to solve the problem of children crying on the first day of kindergarten. However, now it seemed that all his preparations were in vain. Not only did Xishi not cry, but she also looked eager to try. It's fun. Xishi nodded vigorously. However, Xishi didn't cry, but it didn't mean that the other children wouldn't cry. Yang Yi had just finished the registration procedures for Cici when a little boy beside him burst into tears. His mother hurriedly picked up the little boy and coaxed him with red eyes, but she couldn't calm him down no matter how hard she tried. His father was helpless and didn't know what to do. Cici, on the other hand, was shocked. She held her father's hand tightly and stared at the crying little boy. When Yang Yi took her away, Xishi was still lying on her father's shoulder and asked curiously, Papa, what's wrong with that little brother? They didn't know who was older and who was younger. However, Xishi had good genes and was tall. She looked taller than children of the same age, especially the little boy. Yang Yi was afraid that his daughter's mood would be affected. He carried Xishi out and whispered, I don't know. Maybe it's because he's not as obedient as Xishi. Our Xishi never cries, right? Yes, Xishi is so obedient. The little girl smiled happily. However, it was still time to part. Yang Yi took Xishi to the middle class that she was going to. At the door, several teachers were already waiting. The 2 young female teachers on the left and right were Teacher Shen and Teacher Kai respectively. The female teacher in the middle, who was in her 30s or almost in her 40s, was their homeroom teacher, Teacher Mu. Mr. Mu smiled and walked over. He gently placed his hand on Xishi's shoulder and said, Xishi, do you still remember Mr. Mu? Xishi subconsciously leaned toward her father and looked at the other party timidly. After all, she was still a little unfamiliar. We met last time when Dad brought you here. Say hello to Mr. Mu. Yang Yi pushed the little girl's back and encouraged her. Hello, Mr. Mu. At home, Yang Yi and Murphy had taught Xishi these etiquette, but Xishi was still a little shy. She said in a soft voice and hurried back to her father's side. And Teacher Shen and Teacher Kai. Yang Yi pushed his daughter again. After the first time, she was not so shy anymore. Xishi greeted the 2 teachers obediently. Both Teacher Shen and Teacher Kai responded with a smile. Teacher Kai even cutely used her hand to make a duck's mouth and said, Hello, little friend Yangshi. The amiable appearance of the teachers made Xishi gradually let down her guard. At least, she didn't hide by her father's side like she did at the beginning. Then, Mr. Mu, I'll leave Xishi to you. Help me take good care of her. Yang Yi couldn't help but say a few words. She has to drink a bottle of water almost every 2 hours. Then, she has to drink milk in the morning and in the afternoon. We have prepared lunch for her in her school bag. The blue cat's lunchbox is Xishi's, and the other pink cartoon character's lunchbox has the same dish. Xishi said that she wanted to share it with the other children. After a while of explanation, Yang Yi felt a little sour in his nose. When did he become so sentimental? In the past, when Xishi went back to her mother's house, Yang Yi didn't have any emotional fluctuations at all. Mr. Mu looked at Yang Yi with a smile and said, Father Yang, please don't worry. We will take good care of your daughter. Of course, don't we have your mobile phone number? If there's anything, we will definitely communicate with your parents in time. That's good. Yang Yi nodded. It was time to say goodbye to Xishi. Yang Yi squatted down and tidied up his daughter's hat. The little girl wearing a bell-shaped hat had never been so beautiful. Daddy is leaving. Xishi, remember to be good and pinky swear with Daddy, okay? Yang-yi said softly. Where is Daddy going? She was a little confused. She realized that something was wrong. Daddy sent you to kindergarten, and then I'm going home. Yang-yi immediately added. But don't worry, Daddy will come to pick up Shishi after school in the afternoon. Shishi's little face finally stopped smiling. She nervously grabbed her father's hand and asked uneasily. Why is Daddy going home? Because Daddy can't accompany you to kindergarten. Yang-yi seemed to feel that his preparation could come in handy. But why can't you? The little girl was so anxious that her eyes turned red. At this moment, she felt as if her father took her to the amusement park to play, but told her that he couldn't play with her. Yang-yi resisted the urge to hold the little girl in his arms and coax her, because the strategy told him that the more he coaxed her, the more she would cry. Therefore, Yang-yi just gently patted Shishi's shoulder and said softly, because in kindergarten, Shishi has to play with the teacher and other friends. Daddy will come to pick up Shishi in the afternoon to go home for dinner. Remember? You pinky swear with Daddy, and you said that you won't cry. Whoever cries is a dog. Yang-yi stretched out his right pinky and shook it. Well, I won't cry. The little girl's tears were rolling down, but she still held it back. She sniffed and said, But I still don't want Daddy to leave. Daddy will wait for you to come back in the evening and tell Daddy about today's fun, so Shishi must have fun with the children, okay? Yang-yi still couldn't help but wipe the corners of his daughter's eyes. As a result, the golden beans rolled down one by one. However, Shishi was still very obedient. Although she was reluctant to leave, and although she was crying, she still nodded vigorously. The strategy also told Yang-yi that he couldn't stay for too long. The more worried and reluctant he was, the more he had to leave. Because the more he let the children see their parents, the more they would cry. One had to know that children were also very smart. As long as their parents were soft-hearted once, they would take advantage of their parents' soft-heartedness and continue to make trouble. Shishi, goodbye. Daddy will come to pick you up in the afternoon. Yang-yi handed Shishi to Teacher Mu. Then, as his daughter waved at him with tears in her eyes, he steeled his heart and turned to leave. When he turned around, he was very forceful. He lowered his head and walked out, afraid that he couldn't help but look back and be reluctant to leave. Chapter 172. Murphy had already returned to the passenger seat. Seeing that Yang-yi had returned, she couldn't wait to ask when he got into the car. How was it? Did she cry? How's her mood? Did she make a fuss? Yang-yi had already adjusted himself. After all, a man's heart was big. He smiled and said, Even if you didn't ask, I wanted to tell you about our daughter. She's really easy to raise. From the beginning, she was always smiling. She didn't even cry when other children cried. She didn't cry? Murphy's expression was a little disappointed. She cried. Later, when she found out that I didn't accompany her to kindergarten, she still cried. But she was still very obedient and kept holding back her tears. She only cried when I left. Yang-yi thought of his daughter's strong little face and felt very gratified in his heart. However, Murphy's nose twitched when she heard that. She pursed her lips and reached out to hit Yang-yi. She said angrily, You're still laughing? Our daughter is crying, and you're still laughing. How can you laugh? Yang-yi grabbed her hand and complained, I'm not laughing. I just think that she is much better than other children. You didn't see how tragic the other children were crying. The sound was so loud that it almost lifted the ceiling. Then her mother was like that too. She probably felt bad when she heard the crying. And then tears flowed down her face. Yang-yi used this as a topic to talk about with Murphy after a meal, but he didn't notice that Murphy's expression had turned from cloudy to stormy. Oh, I'm also Mom. I feel bad too. Murphy had been holding it in for a long time. When Shishi got out of the car, she suppressed this worry and reluctance in the bottom of her heart. Now that Yang-yi said that, it all came tumbling out. Murphy couldn't help but burst into tears at first. Then she choked with sobs and complained, choking with sobs. What's wrong? Yang-yi was ready to start the car. Now he didn't even have time to insert the key. He turned around and wanted to comfort Murphy. However, Murphy was crying even harder than the last time she cried when Yang-yi angered her. Yang-yi felt a little helpless. He had done a lot of homework before, but none of it was to comfort the adults. It's all your fault for saying those things and making me cry. Murphy's face was filled with tears as she pouted. She turned around and punched Yang Yi's chest. Yang Yi didn't know what was going on, but he pulled her into his arms. Oh! Murphy's cries came to a halt. Obviously, she didn't think that Yang Yi would be so bold. Her small fist was placed in front of Yang Yi's sturdy chest, and she forgot to hammer it down. Well, cry. You'll feel better after you cry. Yang Yi's soft voice sounded in her ears. It has to be said that Murphy's worry about Shishi still prevailed. She cried in Yang Yi's arms again and choked with sobs. Yang Yi, I'm worried about Shishi. It's okay. Yang Yi patted Murphy's thin back and softly coaxed. There will always be such a process. Later, when she gets used to it, she won't cry anymore. But I can't bear to let her leave home. Murphy sobbed in Yang Yi's arms. Thinking about it makes me sad. Yang Yi was puzzled and asked, when a child grows up, it's important for her to leave her parents' wings. Besides, didn't you want Shishi to go to kindergarten in the beginning? Ouch! Yang Yi felt that the soft flesh on his waist was pinched. This time Murphy didn't pick a place with muscles. She found a piece of flesh that wasn't so hard and pinched. Being attacked, Yang Yi subconsciously tightened his muscles, which drove Murphy's little hand away. Even so, he still knew that he said the wrong thing. He quickly corrected himself and said, Don't worry, I'm here, right? If you're really worried, I won't go anywhere today. I'll climb to the roof and secretly guard. I won't let anyone touch Shishi. Murphy shook her head. Yang Yi smelled her slightly curly hair, which exuded a faint fragrance a bit like lily. Then tonight, I'll pick up Shishi and ask her about her situation. I'll call you to tell you. Or I'll let Shishi call you. Anyway, you don't have to worry about anything. You just need to know that I'm here for everything. Yang Yi said. Under Yang Yi's comfort, Murphy gradually stopped crying. She just gently sobbed in Yang Yi's arms. After a while, she said, I won't go back today. I told Xiaowan that I'll wait for Shishi. Yang Yi was stunned and said with some joy, That's great. When we go back, I'll make you a special meal for lunch. Then, we'll pick up Shishi together in the afternoon. If Shishi sees you, she'll be very happy. Murphy was in Yang Yi's arms. Although the storage box was between them and the position was a bit awkward, Murphy, who was weak from crying, felt that this support was very warm. After Yang Yi held Murphy in his arms, his heart was beating very fast. It wasn't that Murphy's soft body gave him a lot of stimulation. Although his body had been empty for a long time, a small flame could start a prairie fire. Yang Yi wasn't thinking about that at the moment. That heartbeat was like two magnets of different poles meeting. That kind of predestined attraction was causing trouble. If it was possible, Yang Yi hoped that he could hug her to the end of the world. Although it didn't suit the situation, Yang Yi felt that his thoughts were like the lyrics of the super hot anime song. Until the end of the world, I don't want to be separated from you. However, obviously there was no need to wait until the end of the world. After all, Murphy wasn't a woman who relied on others. After she regained her senses, she felt that the quiet atmosphere in the car seemed to be wine red, and it was somewhat intoxicating and ambiguous. Murphy raised her head and gently bit her rosy lower lip. Looking at Yang Yi's scorching eyes, she said with slight anger, How long are you going to hug me for? Yang Yi found it difficult to understand Murphy's emotions, but he didn't want to be rude to a beauty. He smiled and let go of his hands, although he was still a little reluctant. The two of them sat back in their normal positions. Mo Fei reached out her hand to brush her hair that was wet with tears and tucked it behind her ears as if nothing had happened. Come wipe it. Yang Yi considerately handed over the pull-out paper box in the car. Murphy said softly. She felt that her performance just now was a little embarrassing. Actually, it was normal. Which mother wouldn't feel heartache and cry when sending their child to school? Whether it was a kindergarten that was close by or a university that was far away. If they did, they would probably hide their tears in the bottom of their hearts. Let's go back. Yang Yi started tyrant, loosened the clutch, stepped on the accelerator, and drove off. After all, men weren't as meticulous as women. Yang Yi couldn't wait to bring Murphy home. How could he still remember his daughter? Maybe, in any case, he would bring her back at night. Maybe that was what he was thinking. Only Murphy was still looking out of the car window with some worry. She was still thinking, I don't know how she is now. Is she scared? Is she still crying? What was she doing now? Chapter 173. Although she had promised her father not to cry, she still felt wronged in her heart, and her tears flowed uncontrollably. However, she was considered to be the most well-behaved among the dozen or so new children in the class. A few of them were crying so hard that they were out of breath, and Teacher Moo and the others couldn't coax them. Sob, sob. Don't cry, okay? You're making me want to cry too. A slightly chubby little girl next to them burst into tears. That loud and clear voice immediately shocked Cece. She looked at her with a tear-stained face with her mouth wide open, and she even forgot to cry. Teacher Shun hurriedly ran over and comforted the loud little girl. Alon Xian, aren't you a senior student? It's not like you've never been to kindergarten before. Why are you crying? There were more than 30 children in the class, and nearly 20 of them were promoted from the lower classes, including Lon Xian. There were only a dozen children like Shishi who had just signed up this year, but because of their age, they could only be transferred to the middle class. Lon Xian rubbed her eyes with her chubby little hands. She sobbed and complained, because they're crying, I can't help it. I miss Daddy too. When Shishi heard her last sentence, her longing for her father suddenly surged. She couldn't help but cry out, sob sob. I miss Papa too, Papa. Shishi and Lon Xian's voices were quite loud. The two of them together immediately suppressed the crying children in the class, and this kind of sadness was contagious. Suddenly, the children in the class cried one after another. Just as Yang Yi said, the crying almost overturned the kindergarten. Fortunately, there were still some children who were used to going to kindergarten. They didn't cry, and they obediently sat on the small bench, not causing trouble for the teachers who were as busy as ants on a hot pan. Except for a little girl who was relatively large. She couldn't sit still, so she jumped down from the chair and walked around the class. This girl was as tall as Shishi. She was the tallest among her peers. However, compared to Shishi, who was as thin as her mother, she was much stronger. Her face was also round, and the other children were a little scared when they saw her. Sigh, all of you are useless. She walked in a circle, and in the middle of the circle she said triumphantly, they're all a bunch of sniveling slugs. Chen Shiyan, you're causing trouble again. Teacher Kai, who was younger, hurriedly ran over and said reproachfully, don't talk to the children like that. That's clearly the case. When I came here, I didn't cry. Chen Shiyan shouted, unconvinced. Shiyan, don't throw a tantrum. Teacher Mu's gentle voice drifted over, causing Chen Shiyan to wilt. However, Teacher Mu still had a way to deal with her. He pulled her to the side and whispered to her gently. Finally, Teacher Mu pulled her over again. Shiyan, do you have something to say to everyone? All right, Teacher Kai, I'm sorry. Children, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that you were. Although Chen Shiyan pouted, under Teacher Mu's gaze she still muttered. With such an episode attracting everyone's attention, the crying of the children gradually stopped. The teachers wiped the tears of the little guys, and were about to start today's lesson. Children, we have 13 new children today, but we don't know each other. So, shall we introduce ourselves first? Teacher Mu asked the children to sit in a circle hand in hand. Teacher Shun and Teacher Kai also sat in the middle of the children. Then she walked around the circle and said, for example, Teacher Mu, what's your name? I know. It was Chen Shiyan again. This big girl raised her hand and shouted, it's Mu Yuyan. That's right. First of all, you have to say your name. Then, you have to tell us what you're good at. Teacher Mu said with a smile. For example, Teacher Mu, I can sing. Hee, Teacher Mu's singing is so good. Chen Shiyan said to the children next to her proudly. However, the children next to her sat upright with their hands behind their backs. Obviously, their parents were strict with them and had no intention of paying attention to her. She sat opposite Chen Shiyan. On her left was a silly little boy, and on her right was a very cute little girl who was secretly wiping her tears. She looked a little pitiful. She looked at Teacher Mu with full attention. Everything was so new to her. Gradually, she let go of her thoughts of her parents. It was the little boy next to Shishi's turn to introduce himself. He stood up like everyone else, but he forgot what to say. Introduce yourself first. Teacher Mu gave him an encouraging look. My name is Nan Xiaoyu, the little boy said timidly. His voice was so soft. Okay, little Xiaoyu, what are you good at? Teacher Mu continued to remind him gently. Of course, there was no need for such young children to say their names clearly. They probably didn't even know how to write their own names. Teacher Mu was able to pronounce accurately because she had already memorized all the children's names and appearances. I can recite poems. When he said this, Nan Xiaoyu's voice was obviously louder. It seemed that he had some confidence in this skill of his. Recite poems? That's great. Our little Xiaoyu must have a good memory. Teacher Mu smiled and clapped. Let us once again welcome Nan Xiaoyu to our family of middle class. The applause was very enthusiastic. These children were very energetic when doing something together. The little boy sat down amidst the applause, his chest straight. Finally, it was Shishi's turn to introduce herself. The little girl stood up and pinched the hem of her skirt nervously. Teacher Mu was still worried that she didn't know what to say and wanted to remind her, but Shishi still opened her mouth. My name is Shishi. No. Shishi thought of something, waved her hand with a red face and said, my name is Yang Shi, because my papa is also Yang. His name is Yang Yi, and then he will call me Shishi. The little girl was a little confused when organizing her words. After all, she was still young, but it was rare for her to speak clearly, unlike the other children who stuttered. Then I can draw. Papa taught me to draw very beautiful pictures, and I can sing. After Shishi finished speaking, she stood there at a loss. She didn't know how to end it. Fortunately, Teacher Mu helped her out. Very good, our little Yang Shishi, introduced herself very well. Let's applaud and welcome her to join us. After a burst of applause, Shishi sat down happily. The little girl beamed with joy, and was in a particularly good mood. She began to have a positive evaluation of kindergarten life. At this moment, it was the little girl's turn to introduce herself. With tears still hanging from her eyelashes, she was even more bashful than Nan Xiaoyu just now. Under Teacher Mu's encouragement several times, she finally said her name in a soft voice. My name is Yang Luoqi, my father calls me Chi-Chi. Chapter 174. The morning class was shortened due to reporting matters and comforting the crying children. Teacher Mu let the children do a round of self-introduction. In the middle of the class, they took a break to let the children drink water and milk. Then they played a small game. It was almost lunchtime. The lunch brought by the children had to be heated up, so Teacher Mu and Teacher Shun went out to the kitchen to help, leaving Teacher Kai to look after the children. Of course, at this time, everyone was free to do whatever they wanted. Shishi was a little uneasy. She sat on her stool and enviously looked at the children playing around. She actually wanted to play like them. This little girl had never been a quiet and introverted girl. At home, she played the craziest. But now, she had never encountered a situation like this. She didn't know how to take the initiative to talk to her friends. She looked like she wanted to say something but stopped. She stood up and sat down again. It made people anxious. On the other hand, the little girl named Yang Luoqi next to her was more calm. She was probably really introverted and didn't fit in with the group. She sat on her stool in a daze and didn't have any intention of talking. At this time, Chen Shiyan, who was surrounded by a few children, swaggered over. She wasn't as quiet as her name suggested. Instead, she was tall and strong. Like a dark cloud, she blocked Shishi's line of sight. I'm Chen Shiyan. Are you Shishi? Chen Shiyan asked loudly. Shishi? This pronunciation made Yang Luoqi, who was next to her, subconsciously raise her head and look at Chen Shiyan in confusion. Mom said it was impolite to sit and talk to others. Shishi quickly stood up. The little girl nodded happily, and then said a little nervously, Yes, I'm Shishi. Are you here to be friends with me? Previously, Shishi and Chen Shiyan were about the same height. But when the two stood side by side, She saw that there was still a little gap. She was a little taller, not by much, about the size of an adult's finger. However, if they didn't stand together, Chun Shiryan's broad shoulders and thick waist made her look as tall as Shi. When Chun Shiryan saw that Shi was taller than her, she felt a little depressed. However, she was still a child after all. She only cared about talking to Shi. Well, I want to be friends with you, but you have to listen to me in the future. Why? Shi asked in confusion. My papa said that I should listen to the teacher. You can choose not to listen to your teacher, but you must listen to me. Chun Shiryan was not happy. She put her hands on her hips and said, they all listen to me. Why don't you listen to me? No, my papa said that I have to listen to the teacher. She pouted. She didn't like other people's fierce look. Then I don't want to be your friend anymore. Chun Shiryan snorted and proudly said. Cece was stunned. She didn't expect to be threatened like this, but it was as if something she loved had been snatched away. The little girl suddenly felt very wronged. She pursed her lips, and tears were about to fall from her eyes. Chun Shiryan, don't bully others. At this time, a messenger of justice came out. It was Lan Xian, the little girl with a particularly loud voice. She was a little chubby. She ran over angrily, took Shishi's hand and said, if you make her cry, I will tell Teacher Mu. Teacher Mu was Chun Shiryan's nemesis. The tall and strong little girl suddenly withered. She muttered, who said that I bullied her? I was just playing with her. Forget it. Let's go somewhere else to play. Chun Shiryan's appeal was quite strong. In an instant, 3 or 4 children who surrounded her ran away with their heads held high. Lan Xian turned her head and said to Shi, don't be afraid. Chun Shiryan likes to bully others. If we tell Teacher Mu, she won't dare to bully us. She still pursed her lips and cried. But they don't want to be my friend anymore. Lan Xian scratched her head anxiously. Oh, don't cry. If you cry, I also want to cry. She was right. Her eyes were a little red, but this time, Lan Xian had an idea and said, I can be your friend. She stopped crying at once. Her delicate little face was like a pear blossom in the rain, but there was a surprised expression on her face. She grabbed Lan Xian's hand and asked, really? Really? Lan Xian smiled and said, but you have to tell me your name. I don't even know your name. The fat little girl didn't even know who Shi was, and she ran over to speak up for her. Shi smiled brightly and said sweetly, you're so nice. My name is Yang Shi, but you can also call me Shi. My papa calls me Shi. What's your name? Lan Xian also happily took Shishi's hand, jumped and said, my name is Lan Xian. My mother calls me Xian Air. You can also call me Xian Air. Hehe, okay, Xian Air, you can also call me Shi. The little girl added nervously, are we good friends now? Yes, we are good friends. Lan Xian nodded and said. The 2 little girls happily held each other's hands and jumped on the ground. After making a friend, Shi was in a good mood. Although there were still traces of tears on her face, her eyes were smiling and her mouth couldn't close. However, she was still not satisfied. This time, she took the initiative to pull Lan Xian to the little girl who was sitting next to her and asked, do you want to make friends with us? Yang Luoqi stood up nervously and looked at Shi and the others at a loss. Shi, you shouldn't ask like that. Lan Xian said. It's not polite. Teacher Mu said that we should greet others first and say hello. Well, I'm sorry. I should say hello. Shi turned to Yang Luoqi and said. Hello. Yang Luoqi shyly waved her right hand. She was really introverted. When talking to strangers, she was so nervous that her mind went blank. Shi learned it this time. She asked first, hello, my name is Shi. She is Xian Air. What's your name? My name is Yang Luoqi, but my father calls me Chi. Yang Luoqi said nervously. Chi, Shi, haha, your names are so similar. Lan Xian laughed. Her laughter was so loud that it could be heard through the wall. You are both surnamed Yang. I thought you were sisters. Hehe, Chi, we are really like sisters. But if we are sisters, then I am the elder sister. Shi said happily. Because I am older. Yang Luoqi smiled shyly. She didn't know how to answer, but she was infected by their enthusiasm and didn't become impatient. Then Chi-Chi, can we be friends? The three of us can be good friends, okay? Chi-Chi asked. Young Luochi's beautiful eyes showed a desire. She asked in a low voice, can we? Of course. We are all good friends in the future. Lan Xian pulled her over and said with a smile. Chi-Chi was the happiest. She suddenly had two good friends. Chapter 175. Hint. It should be 710. I made a mistake. I can't change the title. There are more. When it was time for lunch, Chi-Chi's circle of friends had increased to 4. In addition to Lan Xian and Yang Luochi, there was also Nan Zhaoyu. This shy little boy was also pulled over by the 3 little girls to play together. My papa's cooking is delicious. Mom asked me to bring an extra portion so that we can eat together. Cici told her friends early on that she was really happy to have met so many good friends. She really wanted to take out the things she liked to share with her friends. But my dad also brought me lunch. Yang Luochi said regretfully, I can't eat that much. I also brought food. Nan Zhaoyu said weakly. Then I'll eat with Chi-Chi. Lan Xian said with a smile. I also brought food, but I can eat a lot. It's okay, we can all eat together. Chi-Chi smiled sweetly. My papa is very good. The food he cooks is super delicious. There's a lot of meat. I like chicken wings the most. I like it too. Lan Xian, the little fat girl, was drooling. Teacher Shun and Teacher Kai led the children to the dining area. It was a large dining hall. Every child from every class had to come. There were white, clean tables and long brown stools. They were arranged neatly, and it was very lively. Children, you have to wash your hands first, then you can eat. Teacher Mu smiled gently, clapped his hands and said softly. Chi-Chi and the others lined up and washed their hands at the sink one after another. Chi-Chi looked around curiously and learned from everyone else to turn on the tap and wash her hands. However, Chi-Chi washed very carefully. She paid attention to personal hygiene at home under the request of her father and mother. Lan Xian was more careless. She washed casually and couldn't wait to leave the line. She ran to Teacher Mu and said, Teacher Mu, can I sit with Chi-Chi, Chi-Chi and Nan Zhaoyu? Hey Xian, why? Teacher Mu asked with a smile. Don't you want to sit where you used to sit? No, we're good friends, and we want to sit together and eat. Lan Xian explained. Then Chi-Chi said that she wanted to share her father's cooking with us. I want to eat it too. Teacher Mu rubbed Lan Xian's forehead with a smile and said, Okay, I'll arrange you to sit together later. Sure enough, after a while, Chi-Chi and the others were arranged to sit at a table by the teachers. Lan Xian happily sat next to Chi-Chi, while Yang Luochi sat on the other side of Chi-Chi. Nan Zhaoyu was more miserable, so he could only sit on the opposite side. Let me tell you guys, Mr. Mu is a really nice person. Lan Xian happily said a few more words until Mr. Shun and Mr. Kai distributed the food to all the students. Teacher Shun and Teacher Kai didn't make a mistake, because it was quite easy to recognize. When parents reported in the morning, they were asked to put their children's names on the lunch boxes. Chi-Chi got her 2 boxes of food. She happily opened the blue cat lunchbox. This lunchbox had a built-in mechanism. As long as she pressed a button, it would open by itself. Each layer was spread open, a bit like an automatic pencil box used by primary school students. The bottom layer was white rice. It didn't look as good as when it was just steamed, but it was still fragrant after being heated. The middle layer was mainly vegetables. In order to let Chi-Chi eat more vegetables, Yang put in a little more effort to make a combination of meat and vegetables, fresh shrimp and vegetable rolls. White rice paper wrapped green lettuce, red finely shaved carrot shreds, and beige almond fragments. The most attractive part was the bright red shrimp meat inside. These were fresh shrimp. They were boiled and peeled, cut open like the shrimp on sushi, and then soaked in vinegar and lemon juice. Roll after roll, it looked very tempting and very appetizing. Of course, the most attractive thing for the children was the meat dishes on the top layer. This was the first day. In order to let Chi-Chi eat happily, Yang naturally made her favorite chicken wings. However, this time, Yang Yi changed the method. He made the chicken wings that looked good and not hot. Of course, when he put them into the lunchbox, Yang Yi still removed the ginger and onion that Xixi didn't like. In addition to a few chicken wings wrapped in curd, there were also wood ears, cucumbers, and scrambled eggs with meat slices, which was the legendary mushu meat. The colorful colors really made it look, smell, and taste good. Wow, it looks delicious, Lan Xian said with her eyes shining. Nan Zhaoyu looked at Xixi's lunch, and then looked at his own lunchbox. The white rice was covered with a few poor cabbages and a few pieces of dismal meat. In comparison, it was too horrible to look at. He couldn't help but nod in agreement, and he kept swallowing his saliva. Not only were the meals of her friends not as good as Xixi's, but the lunch of the other two boys sitting at the table was also not as good as Xixi's. Xixi was busy opening the second lunchbox. It opened automatically, and the internal structure was exactly the same. However, there was no rice inside. Everything else was the same as Xixi's lunchbox, but there were a few more chicken wings at the bottom. Yang Yi guessed that the children's favorite food should be chicken wings, so he specially took more. Okay, let's eat together. Xixi happily clapped her hands in front of her chest. Looking at the food, she also felt her stomach growling, but the little girl still didn't forget to call her friends. I want to eat chicken wings. Lan Xian swallowed her saliva and stretched out her chopsticks to pick up a chicken wing. She had already taken a fancy to the largest chicken wing in the red lunchbox, so she wanted to be the first to eat. After putting it back into her lunchbox, the chubby little girl felt a little embarrassed. She pushed her lunchbox and said to Xixi, Xixi, do you want to try the eggplant my mother made? Xixi nodded happily and said, well, I'll eat a piece too. In fact, the chubby little girl thought that it would be best if Xixi ate all of them, and then she would eat Xixi's portion. Wow, it would be too wonderful. Young Luoqi ate in small mouthfuls. Although it wasn't elegant for a child to eat, her movements were still relatively small. She wasn't like the chubby little girl who ate so much that rice grains flew everywhere. She also wasn't like Xixi who ate for a while and had oil stuck to her face. However, she also found it difficult to resist this delicious food. After being reserved for a while, she whispered, Xixi, can I eat one too? I want to eat this. She was referring to the fresh shrimp and vegetable rolls, but Xixi didn't have the time to care about that. She was busy dealing with a piece of super delicious chicken wing. Both of her little hands were moving, and she said vaguely, eat. Seeing Yang Luoqi moving her chopsticks, the reserved Nan Zhaoyu couldn't help but pick up a piece of chicken wing. The two little boys at the same table were also swallowing their saliva crazily. They all felt that their food was tasteless. Finally, one of them couldn't help but reach out his chopsticks hesitantly. Pa! Halfway, it was intercepted by a chubby little hand. Chapter 176. Hint: it should be 810. I made a mistake. I can't change the title. There are still 2 chapters. What are you doing? Lan Xian was actually a very kind girl, except when it came to food. She grabbed the chicken wing with her left hand and nibbled it, while her right hand blocked the little boy's chopsticks. The little boy didn't have the courage to argue, as if he had been caught doing something bad. He drooped his head listlessly and whispered, I saw you all eating, and I want to eat a piece too. Xixi pulled Lan Xian's hand. The little girl was now a big tabby cat, but it was still a beautiful big tabby cat. She said, it doesn't matter, Xian Air, my papa made a lot, and then everyone can eat. Lan Xian resentfully withdrew her hand, but she first put the second chicken wing she had her eyes on into the lunchbox, and then looked at the little boy complacently. However, the other party didn't care about her. The little boy happily picked up a chicken wing, and then thanked Xixi. The word thank you made the little girl so happy that her big eyes narrowed into small crescents. While Xixi was having lunch with her friends, Yang Yi and Murphy were living in their own world. After returning home, Murphy was still a little worried about her daughter. She turned on the TV, but didn't know what content she was watching. Yang Yi, on the other hand, went into the kitchen and did something mysteriously. Of course, at this time, Murphy didn't have the mind to think about what Yang Yi was doing. He said that he would make a special lunch for Murphy, But Murphy didn't think much of it. Yang Yi, on the other hand, was very carefully prepared. After he had this idea before, he had planned for a long time, and also secretly tried to make sure that nothing would go wrong. However, he didn't expect that the opportunity would come so soon, and he could finally take it out. P.S. The following is the teaching section. I originally wanted to skip it directly, but considering that many male readers might use it, I'll introduce it to you. Everything starts with chopping the meat, just like making dumplings. The chopped meat, the carrots, the right amount of 5-spice powder, salt, fresh ginger, monosodium glutamate, and sesame oil are mixed in the same direction. At the same time, the soy sauce is dripped bit by bit. Yang Yi didn't plan to add cabbage or shiitake mushrooms because he didn't really want to make dumplings. If he mixed them like this, it would affect the effect. However, Yang Yi still took out the cabbage. He cut off the leaves and left the stalk, as well as the carrot and cucumber. The latter two were cut into slender slices as thin as cicada wings with a slanted knife. Ignite the fire, take out the pot, boil the water, and wait for the water to boil. Add in the cabbage stalks, carrot slices, and cucumber slices. Boil the carrot slices and cucumber slices for about 30 seconds before removing the water. Boil the cabbage stalks for 2 minutes to ensure that they are softened before removing the water. Next, it was a test of knife skills. With Yang Yi's skills, he could only use the slanted knife to cut out 2 thin layers of skin from the cabbage stalks. The middle layer couldn't be used. This thin layer of cabbage skin looked crystal clear and had more texture than rice paper. Or rather, it was more like a flower petal. That's right. Next, Yang Yi had to pinch the meat filling into small strips, and then wrap it with the cabbage stalks. The top had to be open wide, and the tail had to be slightly narrowed. One couldn't see anything, but when Yang Yi placed the cabbage skin wrapped in the meat filling to make a circle around the edge of the large white plate, the embryonic form had already appeared. Next, the cooked carrot slices and cucumber slices were wrapped in the meat filling in the same way. The green roses were wrapped in the second circle, and then the pink roses were filled in the middle. To decorate, Yang Yi sprinkled a little yellow pepper in the middle. Of course, this wasn't the last step. He still had to steam the meat filling in the steamer. This would take around 15 minutes. After steaming, it was basically ready to eat. However, Yang Yi was a person who strived for perfection. He also poured out the soup from the steamer into the wok, lit the fire and boiled it. Then he poured in water and starch. This process was called thickening. After the soup boiled again, he turned off the heat and poured the soup evenly over the flowers. Instantly, the colorful flowers seemed to have come to life. The crystal-clear dewdrops were very lovable. Time for lunch. Yang Yi pulled Murphy to the dining table. The two of them sat at the side. Murphy also recovered. She looked at the table. There was a dish covered with a spherical lid. She didn't know what it was. Then there was a clean plate in front of each of them. There was also a bowl of prepared sauce. This was simply too simple. Murphy had eaten so many meals at Yang Yi's house, but she had never seen such a simple meal. There was no main dish, and there was only one dish. However, Murphy didn't mind. She was curious about what was under the large hemispherical lid. After all, Yang Yi said that he had prepared it carefully. "Oh, did you make steak? That's not right. Why didn't I smell the steak?" Murphy asked curiously. It really seemed like they were going to eat steak. It was a very Western dining style. When eating, the sauce could be poured over the steak. Of course, some people like to eat with it. However, it didn't seem like it. Murphy saw that there were chopsticks beside the plate, and not a knife and fork. "It's not steak." Yang Yi pulled out the chair in a gentlemanly manner, and served Murphy to sit down. Then he poured fresh orange juice for Murphy. Yes, it seemed like a waste of a glass, but since that incident, Murphy didn't want to touch wine anymore. "Thank you." Murphy saw that Yang Yi was so serious. She found it funny and also became elegant. Yang Yi leaned forward slightly and pressed his right hand on the spherical lid. He said gently, "Murphy, today's dish, I specially researched it for you. I hope you will like it." After that, Yang Yi opened the lid. There was no dazzling light, but there were bright colors. A bouquet of flowers suddenly appeared in front of Murphy. Murphy was stunned for a moment. At first glance, She didn't see it clearly. She thought it was a real bouquet of flowers. While she was moved, she also wondered, are we going to eat flowers for lunch? But after all, she wasn't short-sighted. Murphy quickly recognized that these were just fake flowers. Even the stamens were balls of meat stuffing. Pfft! Murphy was moved and found it funny. She gently hammered Yang Yi's arm with her hand and said, why did you come up with such a trick? Last time, flying wing to wing. What is it now? Yang Yi scratched his head. He really didn't think about the name of this dish. Flying wing to wing was the meaning of chicken wings. But this bouquet of flowers, did it still need a meaning? Murphy looked at Yang Yi's embarrassed look and couldn't help but laugh again. Okay, don't think about it. Even without this name, I like it very much. Thank you for the flowers you prepared so carefully. Yang Yi had been very serious and pretending to be a gentleman. Now he also showed a smile. Murphy's love was the biggest encouragement for him. But how do we eat this? Murphy asked. Eat it like dumplings. Yang Yi reached out and took Murphy's chopsticks. He picked up a pink rose wrapped with carrot slices in the middle, dipped it in soy sauce, and handed it to Murphy. Oh, don't destroy it. Murphy anxiously cried. I haven't taken a picture yet. Chapter 177. In front of a plate of incomplete fresh flowers, Murphy angrily looked at Yang Yi, who awkwardly raised his chopsticks. Then what should we do? Yang Yi was in a dilemma. Put it down, I'll take a picture first. Murphy pouted and pointed to the plate. Well, Yang Yi put the pink rose back. It was the same as before, but the color was darker. After all, it was dipped in sauce. Murphy didn't care. She happily took out her phone and took a few pictures. Of course, in this era, the camera quality was still very low, and the effect was very ordinary. She felt that it was not enough, so she ran to get Yang Yi's DSLR, and let Yang Yi take a picture of her and the fresh flowers. In the camera, Murphy was full of smiles, and she even stretched out her V finger, which he felt was very awkward. I can't bear to eat it. After a while, Murphy muttered, sat back and said, These are all works of art. How can you eat works of art? Yang Yi pondered for a moment, and he said, How about I make something else? You don't want to eat this for lunch? Murphy pulled him, smiled, and said, Okay, I'm just kidding, no need to go through so much trouble. Come, you eat first. Murphy picked up the chopsticks, picked up the pink rose that Yang Yi dipped in sauce, and handed it to Yang Yi. Come, be good and open your mouth. This was the tone used to coax Shishi. Murphy was obviously mischievous. Her eyes were like the autumn water, shining with a smile. In fact, this was Murphy's own chopsticks. But at this time, if he still cared about these things, Yang Yi deserved to be single. Yang Yi did not hesitate to open his mouth. He also very sensibly bowed his head, and let Murphy put the steamed dumpling into his mouth. In the end, he even sucked the tip of the chopsticks. Is it good? Murphy looked at Yang Yi chewing and asked expectantly. Yang Yi nodded. After he finished eating, he said, The taste is not bad. The meat filling is very good. It's just that it's a little cold. You have to eat quickly. Murphy also picked up a piece of pink rose. She didn't mind that the chopsticks had been eaten by Yang Yi before. She followed Yang Yi's example and dipped it in the sauce before stuffing it into her mouth to taste. The sauce was made with vinegar and other condiments to promote digestion. It wasn't very salty, but instead it allowed the fresh taste of the meat to blossom in the mouth. It's delicious. Murphy's eyes lit up and she pouted. Originally, she didn't have much hope. After all, many good-looking dishes sacrifice taste for shape. However, Yang Yi's plate of fresh flowers was unexpectedly delicious. Moreover, Yang Yi's meat stuffing was not only delicious, but it also solidified the water content. It was even more delicious than ordinary dumpling stuffing. Is that so? Yang Yi said with a smile. Mo Fei's affirmation made him feel that it was worth it to spend a lot of effort to make this dish. You eat too. Murphy picked up another pink rose, dipped it in the sauce and sent it over. Yang Yi was stunned. He didn't expect Murphy to pick it up for him. He bowed his head and took another bite. Mo Fei took back the chopsticks at this moment, and an imperceptible blush appeared on her cold face. Only then did she remember that she had just eaten the chopsticks. Then, the two of them kept going back and forth. Didn't that mean that they had indirectly kissed? In order to cover up her inner shame, Murphy bowed her head to capture the other fresh flowers. However, she encountered a problem with the green rose. The thin slices cut out of the cucumber were not so long, and they were very crispy. They didn't wrap the meat filling well like the others. If you accidentally pick it up, the chopsticks will fall apart. Hey, what should I do with this? Murphy asked Yang Yi for help. Yang Yi smiled slightly. He took out his chopsticks and gently said, "Let me do it." Yang Yi's strength was very light. The chopsticks steadily picked up a green rose, dipped it in the sauce, and handed it to Murphy. "This is also good. I've picked it up for you twice. This time, it's your turn to pick it up for me." Murphy blushed and said while eating the green rose. "Cucumber is also very delicious," Murphy said while chewing. "Then try the cabbage." Yang Yi continued to pick for Murphy. Murphy didn't only eat by herself. Her interest was piqued by Yang Yi. She smiled and also picked it up for Yang Yi. The two of them fed each other, and the big plate of fresh flowers was quickly wiped out. In the end, the two of them even used their hands. Yes, Murphy couldn't pick up the green rose, so she directly picked one up. Without dipping it in the sauce, she stuffed it into Yang Yi's mouth. She even giggled and said, "I'm full. The rest is yours. You have to finish it, understand?" Yang Yi nodded, but before he could finish the one in his mouth, Mo Fei stuffed another one into his mouth. She was still using her hands, trying to stuff Yang Yi's mouth full as if she was pranking him. Yang Yi had no choice but to grab Mo Fei's hand. He and Mo Fei stared at each other. At first, Mo Fei was still giggling as if she had been caught doing a prank. But later, when they looked at each other like this, he felt that the temperature between them had risen a little, and the air between them seemed to be conducting electric current. Murphy pursed her lips. She didn't know why, but her heart was beating wildly. "Murphy." Yang Yi finally finished eating. He couldn't help but lick his lips and said softly, "And." Murphy's hand was gently held by Yang Yi. In fact, she could have broken free if she pulled back, but Murphy didn't. She looked at Yang Yi's burning eyes and was a little flustered. "Murphy, let's be together, okay? I like you." Yang Yi actually didn't have the intention to confess again. But after he held Murphy's hand, he couldn't resist the impulse in his heart. This was not something that could be expected. When Mo Fei saw Yang Yi's eyes that were filled with love, she was already mentally prepared. She bit her lower lip. Although she couldn't fake her expression, her mouth was still stubborn. She still pretended to be cold when she said, "That won't do. How can I let you off so easily?" But this wasn't her original intention. After saying it, she immediately added, "At the very least, you have to write a new love poem for me on the spot. I'll only agree if I'm satisfied. And I can't agree to it so easily. Men usually don't cherish things that are too easy to get. I'll just set up a small obstacle for him." The woman thought she was smart. Yang Yi was actually a little disappointed at first. But after hearing Murphy's addition, he was overjoyed. However, Murphy was worried about her own gains and losses. Will it be too difficult to write a poem? What if he can't write it? Hence, Murphy changed her words. "Or you don't have to write a poem. You can draw a comic instead. Just draw the shape of 'I love you.' It has to make me happy." Perhaps Yang Yi could do this? However, Yang Yi quickly shook his head and said, no need to change. I'll read a poem for you now. I'll write it for you." Chapter 178. If love could be obtained with a love poem, then there wouldn't be so many frustrated people in this world. Unfortunately, you and I have the highest difficulty in life mode, but Yang Yi is playing the easy mode. Murphy said, "If you write a new love poem for me on the spot, I'll agree." Yang Yi was overjoyed when he heard this. It was quite troublesome for him to think about how to be romantic, but to write a love poem? This was too easy, so he agreed. Then he tried his best to think of the most romantic love poem to give to Murphy. Got it. Yang Yi stood up, holding a chopstick in his right hand as if it was a microphone. He was a little nervous. His left hand clenched and unclenched, trying his best to adjust his state. Murphy pursed her lips. She couldn't help but feel a little guilty. She wondered if she was too willful and pushed Yang-yi too hard. Perhaps a 17 or 18-year-old girl still had the right to act coquettishly, willfully making a man do this and that for her, willfully making a man satisfy all her requests. But she wasn't a 17 or 18-year-old girl anymore. She was already 30 years old and had a child. How could she still have the right to be arrogant and willful? Although he was Shishi's father, would Yang-yi be impatient? Would he be angry at her willfulness? Murphy was a little nervous. She was afraid that she had crossed Yang-yi's bottom line. What if she couldn't get out of the scene? However, Mo Fei also wanted to experience the kind of sweet love that was described in the book. She also wanted to be like a little princess, to be doted on by a man, to be at her whim, to think of all ways to create romance for her, to give her a surprise. It was very contradictory. Just when Mo Fei was worrying about the gains and losses, Yang-yi coughed softly and began to recite his poem. I love you. Note 1, huh? Murphy looked up in confusion. Was I love you a direct confession? Or was it the name of the poem? I love you, not only because of your appearance but also because of how I am when I'm with you. I love you. Not only because of what you've done for me but also because of what I can do for you. It was really a poem. Murphy was stunned. The first paragraph caused her emotions to surge. She recalled the changes in Yang-yi over the past 2 months. Perhaps this was his heartfelt confession? I love you because you can summon the truest part of me. I love you because you pass through the wilderness of my heart, as easily as the sun passes through a crystal. My foolishness, my weakness, almost does not exist in your eyes. But the most beautiful place in my heart is illuminated by your light. Murphy stared blankly at Yang-yi. At this moment, she felt that Yang-yi had spoken her mind. Yes, she felt that it was the other way around. Although Yang-yi was confessing, Murphy felt that it was her foolishness and her weakness that almost did not exist in Yang-yi's eyes. She was also a little ashamed because she used to be very picky. She often complained to Mo Xiaowan about Yang-yi's stubbornness and Yang-yi's rigidity, but she did not notice his shining point, his intoxicating excellence. Yang-yi said that she had summoned the truest part of him. Murphy felt that she really did not think as much as Yang-yi, so she was both touched and ashamed. Yang-yi's voice was very pleasant. It was a very sexy, magnetic voice. He continued to read gently and with a cadence. No one else has bothered to walk so far, no one else has found it too troublesome to find. So no one has discovered my beauty, so no one has been here. I love you, because you have turned my rotten life into a magical one. At this moment, Yang-yi's voice became emotional because he had integrated his true feelings. He felt that he had long been tired of the killing and loneliness of his previous life. But in this life, his ordinary world had become colorful because of Shishi and Murphy. Yes, wasn't it just turning rotten into magical one? Murphy's mood was also somewhat indescribably proud, or perhaps secretly happy. Yang-yi was quite right. No one has discovered my beauty. Murphy now felt that she was very lucky, because in the past he had spent his youth in the military camp. Not long after he came out, he met her. Although the cause of their meeting was not good, and the process was very subtle, now it seemed that the result was good. Fate had tightly tied them together, and did not let other flirtatious sluts take him away. Only in this way would she have the chance to discover Yang-yi's excellence. This man was single-minded and had never been a womanizer. This man took care of his family. He took care of his daughter without any complaints or regrets. He was even better at housework than a woman. This man was brimming with talent. He could write best-selling novels, write sweet love poems, cook well, and tell interesting stories. This man was also very romantic. Usually he was like a big block of wood, but as long as he made up his mind to be romantic, it was really mushy. More importantly, all of this seemed to have changed for her. He was becoming better bit by bit for her. She was very glad that Yang-yi used to hide his excellence with a rigid and nerdy mask. She was glad that she could gradually unearth his beauty. Because with you my life is no longer an ordinary inn, and has become a magnificent temple. In my work day in and day out, no longer full of complaints, but full of beautiful melodies. Yang-yi was still reciting affectionately, but Murphy could no longer suppress the rolling emotions in her heart. She covered her mouth and looked at Yang-yi affectionately with tears in her eyes. At the end of the poem, it still began with a passionate confession. I love you, because you can make my life incomparably beautiful more than faith, because you can make my life full of joy more than fate. And you have done all of this, without a trace of strength, a word, or a hint, just because you are you. What kind of affectionate confession was better than telling the other party? It's not because of anything else, but because of you. You made everything beautiful for me, so I love you. Murphy understood Yang-yi's poem. She was crying. She was so touched that she couldn't speak. She didn't know what to say. Yang-yi was a little nervous. He asked carefully, how is it? Is this poem okay? Murphy nodded, shook her head, and nodded again. Yang-yi was confused. What did this mean? Okay or not? However, Yang-yi thought that Murphy would only agree to him if she was satisfied. It seemed that this tearful expression couldn't be considered as satisfaction. It's okay if it's not okay. I still have more. Yang-yi was determined today. Even if he had to memorize all the poems from his previous life, he would make Murphy satisfied. He raised his chopsticks again and recited affectionately. How I wish there was a door in the morning. The sun shines on the grass, we stand holding on to our door, the door is low. But the sun is bright, the grass is bearing its seeds, the wind is shaking its leaves, we stand and don't speak, it's very beautiful. Note 2, it was another classic. Yang-yi was painting a beautiful picture. A picture of the two of them being together, a picture of happiness. In fact, it already existed. There had been many beautiful mornings like this in the past. The grass was long and the orioles were flying. The two of them were singing on the balcony, or on the grass below. But it wasn't just the two of them, there was also a cute little girl. These beautiful things were also what Murphy looked forward to. She was so moved that she couldn't control herself. Tears blurred her vision, and happiness blocked her voice in her throat. She could only shake her head vigorously. Still not okay? Yang-yi misunderstood. He scratched his head and said seriously, then I'll continue. I said no need. I'm satisfied. I promise you. Murphy choked and shouted, but her voice was distorted. Yang-yi heard it vaguely. He asked doubtfully, what did you say? I said I love you. Murphy stamped her feet and stared. She wiped her tears and said angrily. Yang-yi heard it clearly this time, but he couldn't believe his ears. Ah? You, what did you say? Ugh. This time he couldn't speak. Chapter 179. In the afternoon, Murphy urged Yang-yi to pick up their daughter early. Although it was still a little early, there were still 2 hours before school ended. Yang-yi couldn't persuade Murphy, so he drove Tyrant out. When Murphy got into the car, her hair was still a little wet and messy. However, there was no need to think too much. Nothing indescribable happened between Murphy and Yang-yi in the afternoon. Although Yang-yi was pressed against the wall and kissed by Murphy, he didn't go any further. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but Murphy's period hadn't left yet. It really wasn't the time. Yang-yi looked at Murphy. The more he looked at her, the more he liked her. He couldn't help but grin. It was said that a woman's IQ was 0 when she was in love. Now, it seemed that this man wasn't much better. He was smiling like a fool. Murphy blushed. She said in annoyance, what are you smiling for? Now that you've succeeded, you're getting carried away? What? Yang-yi reached out to pick up Murphy's hand and gently intertwined their fingers. However, his hand was bigger, so he easily pried open Murphy's fingers. I just think that you're especially beautiful. This blockhead was enlightened? What a load of flirtatious words. Murphy's heart was about to burst with honey. She pursed her lips. She didn't know how to answer, so she looked at Yang-yi. Murphy muttered in her heart. Only now do I realize that this blockhead is actually quite handsome. He's tall and big. His hair is never meticulously groomed like those pretty boys, but it's neat and clean. He has a strong face and sharp eyebrows. Originally, I thought he was very rigid, but now he's becoming more and more manly. Don't tell others that he has a great figure. Beauty was really in the eye of the beholder. Murphy looked at Yang-yi, and the more she looked at him, the more she liked him. The two of them held hands and looked at each other affectionately. After some time, the mother or Murphy reacted first. Yes, Shishi. She retracted her hand and found that Yang Yi was holding it very tightly. She could only rebuke him and say, "Hey, when are you going to stop pulling me? Are you still going to drive?" Only then did Yang Yi come to his senses. He quickly let go of his hand and smiled embarrassedly. He turned the key and started the car. Ding-ling-ling. The phone's alarm woke up the two people who had waited for more than an hour, because they had arrived too early. They couldn't help but do indescribable things in the car. Murphy hurriedly pushed Yang Yi away and sat up straight in the front passenger seat. She turned the rearview mirror and looked at the celebrity in the mirror. Her cheeks were rosy and her lips were slightly swollen, but she was still beautiful. Her hair, which had been washed in the afternoon, was messy again. Her clothes were also a little untidy. It was all because of that restless big hand. Murphy hurriedly tidied herself up and grumbled, "Isn't it already 5:30? Hurry up and pick up your daughter." Yang Yi reached out and gently tucked a strand of Murphy's hair behind her ear. He smiled and said, "Don't be nervous. I'll go now." In front of the kindergarten, there was a lot of traffic. Many luxury cars drove directly to the road in front of the gate to wait for the children. Yang Yi walked to the gate of the kindergarten. He was very calm and didn't feel that it was beneath him. Of course, he had been busy with their world the whole day. Yang Yi only connected the string when he arrived here. He began to worry about his daughter. How is the little girl today? Did she cry all day? Although he was tall and there was almost no one in front of him who could block his line of sight, Yang Yi couldn't help but stand on tiptoe to look for the little figure of his dreams. After a while, Yang Yi saw Teacher move first. He looked behind him closely. Finally, after one child after another, Shishi's little head finally appeared in his field of vision. The little girl was holding hands with her friends. There was a little beauty on the left and a little fat girl on the right. No, she wasn't fat. She was just a little fat. She was also a little girl with delicate facial features. Shishi. Yang Yi couldn't help but become excited when he saw his daughter. He didn't have his usual calmness and raised his hand to shout. Shishi heard the voice. Her eyes lit up and she quickly looked in the direction of the voice. Then, she saw her father standing high in the crowd of waiting parents. "Papa!" Shishi called out happily. At this moment, she forgot about her friends. She let go of her friend's hand. Shishi twisted her body, squeezed out of the crowd, and ran in the direction of her father. "Hey, don't worry." Teacher Shun, who was standing at the side, couldn't hold on to Shishi. The thin girl had already squeezed out. At the entrance of the kindergarten, there were not only many children but also many parents. Teacher Shun couldn't let Shishi run out of the crowd by herself. What if she was knocked down and stepped on by the crowd? Teacher Shun quickly chased after her, but she couldn't knock down other children. She could only squeeze through one by one. How could she be as nimble as the small and delicate Shishi? Yang Yi also squeezed his way out of the crowd of parents. When he saw his daughter, he forgot everything. He, who didn't care much about the morals of the world, forcibly squeezed his way out of the crowd with his tall and strong body and strength. This caused a lot of complaints and scoldings. "Hey sir, you can't go in yet." There were two teachers guarding the door. The parents had to let the teachers in batch by batch to pick up their children. So when they saw Yang Yi, they hurriedly stopped him. Yang Yi's mind sobered up a little. He wanted to explain, but Shishi finally ran to the door. The little girl squeezed out when the teachers weren't paying attention, and happily jumped on her father. "Papa!" Shishi. Yang Yi happily squatted down and held his daughter in his arms. Her small and soft body, her sweet and coquettish voice. The happiness of being a father instantly exploded. "Papa Yang, you can't do this." "Shishi, do you know how dangerous it was just now?" Teacher Shin finally caught up with them. He caught Yang Yi and Cece and gave them a lesson. He was exasperated that they didn't live up to his expectations. Yang Yi really didn't expect that. When he saw Shishi, he forgot the rules of the kindergarten. Now that he calmed down, he remembered that he was reckless. He was a little embarrassed to accept the criticism. Teacher Shun gave him a small punishment. He couldn't leave with Shishi immediately. He still had to go back to the kindergarten and wait for the other parents to come in and pick up their children. Then they could leave the kindergarten together. Shishi, who had missed her father all day, clung to his neck and refused to come down. Yang Yi had to hold her and stand with a group of children. Then he became the object of the children's admiration. "Uncle, are you Shishi's father?" A little fat girl looked up and asked. Her voice was very loud. Yang Yi, who was playing with her daughter, lowered her head, looked at the other party and smiled gently. Excian. At this time, Shishi asked her father to put her down. She happily took the little girl's hand and introduced her to her father. "Papa, this is my first good friend Excian. She is a very nice person. She also likes to eat Papa's dishes." Shishi happily introduced her. Lon Excian nodded hard, clenched her small fist and said, Yes, Uncle's chicken wings are delicious." Yang Yi smiled and rubbed his daughter's head. Then he gently said to Lon Excian, "Tomorrow I will cook something delicious for you. Shishi, I am your first friend." At this time, a tall and strong little girl also came over and shouted. Then she looked at Yang Yi expectantly. "Uncle, I also like to eat." "Papa, this is Chen Shiyin. Okay, you are my first friend. She is also very powerful and very strong." Shishi happily introduced her new friends. Didn't Chen Shiyin have a bad relationship with Shishi? How did they become good friends again? Chapter 180. In fact, how could there be so many unresolvable grudges between children? Although Chen Shiyin was a little sarcastic and arrogant in the morning, which made Cici unhappy, Cici had almost completely forgotten about it when she turned around. Moreover, she had made a few good friends to add to her happiness. At noon, Chen Shiyin was restless as usual. After eating a few mouthfuls of rice, she waddled around the canteen. Teacher Mu and the others had to take care of some children who were spoiled by their parents and didn't know how to eat by themselves, so they didn't have time to take care of her. As a result, Chen Shiyin, who passed by Shishi's table, was captured by Shishi's chicken wings. The kind Shishi didn't refuse. She even happily asked Chen Shiyin to eat with her. Lon Excian was actually a little unhappy, but it wasn't because she was hostile to Chen Shiyin, but because she was worried that Chen Shiyin, with her big appetite, would steal all the delicious food. However, Chen Shiyin came a little late. Lon Excian and Shishi were full, so she didn't care too much. Chen Shiyin, a carefree little girl, didn't feel that she had isolated Shishi from her circle of friends. She just didn't play with her temporarily because Shishi was disobedient. "Chen Shiyin, are we still good friends?" Shishi asked nervously. "Of course," Chen Shiyin said matter-of-factly. "I'm the first one who wants to make friends with you." Maybe Shishi was still disobedient. But Chen Shiyin thought that since she had so much delicious food, it was nothing to be disobedient. "So she made a lot of friends because of my dishes. Haha, it seems that I have to prepare more in the future," Yang Yi said to Murphy proudly. His hands didn't stop turning the steering wheel to pass the corner of the overpass. On the way back, Yang Yi had just received his punishment. However, this punishment was neither painful nor itchy. Yang Yi even enjoyed the admiring eyes of the children. Although he didn't know the truth, he still felt that he had made a great contribution in the process of making friends with Shishi. Other than Chen Shiyin and Excian, there's also Chi-Chi. Shishi waited for her father to finish before she told her mother about her new friend. "Chi-Chi is my third friend. Chi-Chi doesn't like to talk." "Chi-Chi?" Murphy asked curiously. "Her name is so similar to yours." "Chi-Chi's name is Yangluachi. Her papa calls her Chi-Chi. Hee, it's very similar to my name." Excian even asked if we were family. Shishi mischievously stuck out her little tongue and said, "I think if we're a family, I should be Chi-Chi's older sister." "Haha, do you really want to be an elder sister that much?" Murphy rubbed the little girl's head and laughed. "Because I'm older than Chi-Chi," Shishi said matter-of-factly. However, he didn't know if she was referring to age or height. "It doesn't matter. I'll make you an elder sister in the future," Yang Yi said from the front row. "Really?" Shishi grabbed the back of the chair in front of her and asked in surprise. How could Murphy not understand Yang Yi's meaning? She blushed and pulled the little girl back. She said angrily, "Don't pay attention to your father's nonsense. Go on and tell mommy. What other friends have you made?" "There's Nanjiaoyu." He doesn't like to talk either, but he can recite poems. In the afternoon, Nan Zhaoyu recited a poem to us. She said. Yang Yi became vigilant. Is it a boy? Yes. Nan Zhaoyu is a boy. Chi and Xian are girls. Chen Shiyan is also a girl. She didn't understand, so she explained. It doesn't matter if it's a boy. She will know a lot of boys in the future, Murphy said with a smile. Tell me, what poem did he recite? Yang Yi didn't really listen to Shishi's words. He was still pondering. Shishi knew a boy? And they became good friends? Next time he would have to see which boy it was. Then he would pay close attention and keep a close watch. Before this, Yang Yi had thought of a plan. If any boy wanted to get close to Shishi, he would take a knife. Along the way, the little girl was chattering with her mother about the interesting things in kindergarten. She was full of energy. Although Shishi used to like talking to her parents, she was never so cheerful as today. Murphy felt that this kindergarten was worth it. She was a little disappointed. After all, Shishi's reaction wasn't as she had expected. She didn't cry the whole day because she missed her mother. But overall, Shishi's condition was still good. When they got home, Yang Yi went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. Mo Fei was still asking Cici about her experience in kindergarten in detail, and Cici was still talking about it one by one, no matter how big or small. Chi can dance. She can dance very well. It turned out that in the afternoon, Mr. Mu had arranged a small talent show for each child to perform their own talent. Of course, not every child was multi-talented. There were also many timid children who didn't know anything and stood in the middle at a loss. At this time, Mr. Mu would come up to smooth things over. He would encourage and guide them to work hard to show off their talents. He would even let them do a somersault on the ground. After that, he would call on the other children to applaud him. Although it was a little ridiculous, it had to be said that this encouragement made these children come out of their own small circle one by one. They were more confident in bravely showing off their talents in the future. Murphy asked curiously, Then Shishi, what did you perform? I know a lot. Shishi puffed out her chest and said proudly to her mother. But the teacher said that there was no piano, so Shishi couldn't play the piano. Shishi could only sing. Xian also sang. She sang very loudly. What song did Shishi sing? Murphy saw that the little girl had gone off topic again. She smiled and pulled the topic back. Can you show it to Mom again? Okay. Shishi was the most eager to perform. She was full of energy to show her mother that she had been praised by the teacher. I'll do it like this. Mom, you sit here. Everyone has to sit in a circle. The little girl was very good at acting. She pulled Murphy to sit down and then took her big bear cub, dolls, and even the pillows on the sofa to act as an audience. Okay, that's fine. Just pretend that there are so many children around. If Murphy hadn't stopped the little girl, Shishi would have put up more than 30 dolls. Then I'll start singing. The little girl stood in the middle of the circle. Of course, she had forgotten how nervous she was at that time. Like a real singer, she began to sing, let it go, can't hold it back anymore. Shishi's voice wasn't as loud as Lan Xian's, but it was crisp and textured. It was delicate and strong, and it was very distinguishable. Moreover, Shishi's singing was very accurate. This English song was not worse than the original sound of the movie. It was full of tender feeling and sounded very good. Murphy had heard this melody before. It was also sung by the little girl, but she was busy with her comeback album at that time and didn't pay attention to it. Now, she was listening attentively. However, Cici stopped after singing it twice. Why don't you sing? Finish singing. Murphy said excitedly. She wanted to see if her daughter could really finish singing an English song. I can't sing. I can't remember that much. The little girl pouted and said, Papa is amazing. Papa can sing a lot. He sings very well. Yang Yi, he sang this song to his daughter? And it was an English song? A question flashed in Murphy's mind that she should have noticed a few months ago. Chapter 181. Murphy's mind flashed a question that she should have noticed a few months ago, but it was just a flash. She was in the stage of being in love, and her IQ was not that high. Although she thought of this question, She immediately found an excuse for Yang Yi. He had sung the English version of the birthday song on Shishi's birthday. Therefore, Murphy did not delve into it and continued to listen to Shishi's story. The next day, Yang Yi sent Shishi to kindergarten to play with her friends, and then sent Murphy to the company. She did not have time to care about love. The preparation for the new album had officially begun, and Murphy was complacent and wanted to create a miracle. Mo Shawan came to the office early. When she saw Murphy, she laughed. "What's wrong? Is there something on my face?" Murphy was still puzzled and touched her face. Mo Shawan walked over with a smile and pulled Murphy to sit down on the sofa in the office. Then, she took out a small mirror for touching up her makeup and showed it to Murphy. "Sister Faye, there's nothing on your face. It's just your makeup. Sai, I know you have a deep relationship with brother-in-law, but you have to be careful. If you're photographed, it'll be troublesome." Murphy saw that her face was pink in the mirror. More importantly, the lipstick on her mouth was smudged, as if someone had eaten a piece of it. This bastard. Murphy bit her lower lip gently. She was so embarrassed that she almost couldn't raise her head. She secretly complained about Yang Yi in her heart, but she still refused to admit it. "No, I was in a hurry this morning and didn't put on the lipstick properly." Mo Shawan curled her lips and snorted. "You're still hiding it from me? Sister, it's obvious, okay? Look at your rosy little face. It's obvious that you had a good time yesterday." It seemed that Mo Shawan was right not to disturb them yesterday. She was secretly happy. She even came over and hugged Murphy's arm. She laughed and said, "Come tell me, is brother-in-law great? His body is so good. He must have tormented you a lot, right?" Mo Shawan and Murphy were relatives and work partners. At the same time, it could be said that they were best friends. Between girls, they could talk about this kind of topic without any scruples. However, Murphy was still shy. She blushed and spat. "Don't talk nonsense. A few days ago, I asked you to buy me sanitary pads. It's not like you didn't know." "Oh, right, then you can't have sex. Sigh, what a pity," Mo Shawan said regretfully. However, she curiously leaned over and asked, "Elder sister, didn't you say that you wanted to test brother-in-law again? Why did you let him so easily?" "Bah, what do you mean by let him do it?" Murphy pinched Mo Shawan reproachfully. Her face was red, but she couldn't help but want to share her happiness. She took out her phone and whispered, "Let me show you something." Mo Shawan mumbled, "I don't want to see. I don't want to see. It must be dog food again." However, the flame of gossip was burning fiercely. How could she not want to see? Although she said that, her body leaned over obediently. Murphy found the photo of the pot of flowers that Yang Yi made for her yesterday. She couldn't help but smile when she looked at it. She pulled Mo Shawan and said, "Look, he prepared this yesterday afternoon. Guess what it is?" "Flowers." Mo Shawan didn't think much of it at first glance. She curled her lips. "Sister, do we have to be so cheap? He just gave you a bunch of flowers and you're already captivated? What? Take a closer look." Murphy snickered. She also admired Yang Yi for being able to make it look so real, although it was also related to the blurriness of the phone's pixels. Mo Shawan looked carefully this time. From the 3D layering, it was different from flowers. Moreover, it was placed on a big plate. She asked in surprise, "Hey, if it's not flowers, what is it?" "It's dumplings." Murphy covered her mouth and laughed. She explained to Mo Shawan a little proudly, I'm blind. I can eat dog food just by looking at a photo. Why didn't anyone give me such cute dumplings? This foodie beauty swears that I will marry whoever gives me a plate of dumplings." Mo Shawan shouted in envy. Hee hee, well, seeing you in so much pain, I won't tell you what kind of poem he wrote for me later. Mo Fei held back her laughter and said, "So that you won't be in more pain." But women were creatures. They would die if they didn't gossip. It would have been better if Murphy didn't say it. Once she did, Mo Shawan couldn't hold back anymore. She quickly pulled Murphy and asked, tell me, what poem did brother-in-law write for you? Is it very mushy?" Under Mo Xiaojuan's threat of scratching an itch if you don't tell me, Murphy compromised. She read the 2 poems that Yang Yi wrote for her to Mo Xiaowan. After a while, Mo Xiaojuan's scream came from the office. Ah, what sin did I commit? Why did I court death by eating dog food? Great, now my eyes are deaf and my ears are blind. Huh. Something's not right. Today, Mo Xiaojuan arranged for Murphy to meet the music producer invited by the company. Tianmei and Tianxiang were different. Tianmei was a management company, while Tianxiang was a record company. The former naturally couldn't be like the latter, which had some outstanding music producers in the company. When it came to releasing a record, the company would hire a producer in the industry to help. It could be a producer under a good record company that didn't have a schedule for the time being. Or it could be a producer who worked on his own. It was a bit like the nature of a mercenary, but the former's standard was higher than the latter's. Not all of them, but it was common. This time, the producer that Tianmei invited was a middle-aged musician named Ji Ningming. He belonged to the latter and opened his own studio. Ji Ningming's name sounded like he came from a small country in the north, but Ji Ningming was a real China citizen, and a musician born and raised in Shanghai. He wasn't unknown. 10 years ago, he produced a record for a singer, which was shortlisted for the Chinese Gold Record Award. He was also considered a little famous in the industry. However, it was also at that time that Ji Ningming chose to jump out and become an independent producer, but he didn't expect that the road would be so bumpy. After 10 years, he didn't encounter the opportunity that he had at that time. Not only did he not soar to the sky, but it also brought about a negative impact on his reputation. Of course, Ji Ningming didn't just sink into depravity. He worked hard for a few years and sharpened his edges. He also took on some small orders that he used to disdain, but his own ability was honed. However, Ji Ningming, who lacked resources and opportunities, was still unknown. Although Murphy had heard of this producer a long time ago, she couldn't remember at all. Before meeting Ji Ningming, she asked puzzledly, "Xiaowan, who is this teacher Jean? What about teacher Duan?" Teacher Duan Shurong was also an independent music producer. However, before she jumped out, she was already a famous producer with extensive connections and resources. In her own studio, there were more than a dozen assistants, unlike Ji Ningming, who was in such a difficult situation. In the past, Murphy's records were basically collaborations with her, including the platinum-selling Same Ink Road. The cooperation between the two was very tacit. Chapter 182. Speaking of this, Mo Xiaowan became unhappy and said, "The company said that teacher Duan's schedule couldn't be arranged. I called teacher Duan today to ask about her health, and found out that teacher Duan did have an appointment, but it was arranged for Zhen Zhen's new album." She didn't know if it was arranged before Murphy took out the 12 songs, but Mo Xiaowan couldn't argue with Sister Ling, but she felt very unhappy. Mo Fei frowned, but with her calm temperament, she didn't intend to care too much about it. She nodded and said, "Then what about Ms. Jean?" The meeting was originally arranged to be yesterday, but Murphy pushed it to today. Mo Xiaowan still received Ji Ningming and let him look at a few song scores and had a certain degree of interaction. "Teacher Jean is not bad," Mo Xiaowan said with some excitement. "He's very humble, not as tough as teacher Duan." "Xiaowan, don't say that about teacher Duan. She's just strict," Murphy reprimanded. Mo Xiaowan pouted. "Okay, strict. Anyway, teacher Jean is very gentle and is a very easygoing person." Then I asked him about some of his opinions on these songs. Some of the ideas he talked about were quite similar to yours. His thinking is also very agile. He's probably a real talented producer. She was originally worried that the company would go back on their word and invite a producer with no ability to perfunctorily deal with Murphy. Now, it seems that Mo Xiaowan felt that she was overthinking engaging the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a petty person. "No matter what, you should go and see him first before you evaluate. I'm not as professional as you guys," Mo Xiaowan said with a smile. In the reception room, Murphy saw Ji Ningming. The other party was a middle-aged man in his 40s. He wore gold-rimmed glasses and sat upright with his hands on his knees. Murphy wasn't good at dealing with people. After saying a few words, she spoke less and listened more. Fortunately, Mo Xiaowan was there to joke around, so the atmosphere wasn't too awkward. What does Teacher Jean think of the songs in my album? Murphy asked faintly. When it came to songs, Kim Ming was in high spirits. He first praised the lyricist Mu Xiang's ability. This is a composer with many different styles. I have never seen such a talented person who can handle blues, rock, and ancient styles at the same time. And what's even rarer is that the songs they create are all top-notch. Then, he talked about some of his preliminary views on the arrangement. Basically, Jin Ming did not change the original song much. Instead, he added some unconventional instruments to make the accompaniment of the song fuller and mellower. Jin Ming was in high spirits. After talking a lot, he sighed and said, I heard that Mu Xiang hides himself very well and doesn't show up easily. It's a pity. I really want to get to know him and discuss the use of some musical instruments with him. In Jin Ming's opinion, Yang Yi's original score was already close to perfect. It was not monotonous at all. Instead, it was integrated with a variety of musical instruments. This was a topic that he liked to study. Over the years, he had been experimenting on the small lists of small celebrities. He had found his own way of doing things. Murphy nodded slightly. She listened more than she spoke, but Murphy still approved of Jin Ming's musical concept. After today's meeting, Murphy was also relieved. Although Jin Ming was not famous, he was indeed a capable person. Murphy began to look forward to working with Jin Ming. She wanted to see what kind of results he could produce from Mu Xiang's work. The early publicity of Prison Break received a somewhat polarized response from the readers. Some expressed strong opposition and suspicion towards Yang Yi's double release, while others supported Yang Yi as usual, looking forward to what kind of story Yang Yi could create for them. Of course, most of the latter were converted from the former. For example, Mu Yuqing. At the beginning, he was especially worried that Yang Yi could not guarantee the quality of his work after his double release. However, after following a group of fastidists to study the tattoo in the poster, Mu Yuqing gradually developed a strong interest in Prison Break. Finally, the day of the new book's release arrived. Mu Yuqing had been waiting in front of the computer. He did not know if he was the first one, but when the first chapter was refreshed, he immediately clicked on it to read. This novel had revealed its uniqueness from the very beginning. There was no chapter name. Below the chapter number was an illustration. Mu Yuqing glanced at it and skipped over. It was not that he was not interested. It was because he had seen this illustration countless times. It was the colorful tattoo on the back. The story unfolded with the words. Mu Yuqing saw a scene in a tattoo shop. The protagonist, Michael Schofield, was receiving a tattoo that almost covered his upper body amidst the buzzing sound of the machine. Michael Schofield? Mu Yuqing frowned. This was a foreigner's name. Could the story take place overseas? Note 1. However, it was not difficult to understand. Tattoos were a relatively niche hobby in China. It was not recognized by the mainstream. Mu Yuqing did not mind and continued reading calmly. While Michael was being tattooed, the tattooist Sid, a gypsy woman with a nose ring, had a conversation with him. Most people choose to start with a small design when they get their first tattoo. Sometimes it's the abbreviation of their mother's or girlfriend's name. Sometimes it's something similar. But they're not like you, who spent 2 months doing a complete set of tattoos. If it were someone else, they would probably have to do it for a few years. Michael put on his clothes and took a deep breath. He said meaningfully, I don't have a few years. Or I wish I did. Mu Yuqing touched the stubble on his chin. He had a feeling that the author had deliberately foreshadowed something when he wrote this paragraph. However, he did not need to guess. The rest of the story progressed very quickly. Michael returned to a high-end high-rise apartment in a suit and began to tear down the newspaper clippings on the floor-to-ceiling glass window. Suit and leather shoes? So this guy with such a scary tattoo was a gentleman? Mu Yuqing felt that the story was getting more and more interesting. What was even more interesting was that there was another illustration in the article. It was an illustration of a hand tearing apart a newspaper clipping. Mu Yuqing looked at it carefully with interest. A few of the stickers could still be seen clearly. For example, there was a map that looked like a subway route. There was a newspaper clipping that clearly outlined a big headline. Lincoln Barrow's final appeal rejected. The text of this chapter only described how Michael opened the window in the bright night and threw the computer hard drive into the artificial lake downstairs like a pitcher in baseball. What happened after that? Mu Yuqing felt that things were not simple. This tattooed man had already started to clean up the traces. He was definitely going to do something big. However, this damn chapter break. The story stopped here. Mu Yuqing scratched his head in annoyance. He returned to the webpage and tipped the author first. Then he urged him to update in exasperation. Master Yang Yi, don't leave me hanging like this. Hurry up and update, or your legs will be broken. Chapter 183. Urge him to update? That didn't exist for Yang Yi. He still updated according to his own pace. Dividing the day into 2 parts to update 2 chapters was the limit of his ability. It wasn't that it was difficult to rewrite the plot of a TV series into words. If it was just words, Yang Yi could update a few chapters a day without a problem. But this novel needed a lot of illustrations to help the audience understand the plot and the characters. Drawing the illustrations took a lot of time. Updating 2 chapters a day was enough for him. Moreover, Yang Yi didn't like to spend a lot of time on drawing and writing novels. He still had his life, shishi and music. Well, there was still the coffee shop that he was worried about. Boss, another cup of mocha. Another customer called out. Okay, wait a moment. Yang Yi's thoughts were interrupted. He quickly brewed a cup of coffee and brought it over. After school started, the originally obscure coffee shop became lively. Even if there weren't many students coming in through the back door, it couldn't handle the huge student base of the university. Dozens of people came in a day, which was enough for Yang Yi to deal with. Moreover, some customers didn't leave after finishing their coffee. Some of them came with friends and talked for a few hours. There were also some who used the coffee shop as a study room. After buying a cup of coffee, they hid in a quiet corner to read and study. They sat there for the whole morning or afternoon. Did they think the music in the coffee shop was noisy? No, they were listening to music with their headphones. Yang Yi didn't care about these people occupying the space. He didn't care whether the coffee shop made money or not. Why would he care about these problems? He felt that with more customers he would have less time. When he was busy, he wouldn't have time to daydream. Yang Yi missed the situation when there were only 2 or 3 customers a day. It was so good. He didn't have to make coffee or wash cups. Most of the time, he would sit alone in the shop and listen to music with his eyes closed. Now, if Shishi didn't go to kindergarten, he wouldn't have time to accompany her, right? Yang Yi brought the coffee over and sat down at the bar. He frowned slightly and thought, this won't do. I have to think of a way. How about hanging a sign at the door, saying that only 2 or 3 guests would be accepted a day? If there were any more, they would stop selling coffee. However, he didn't seem to be such a big shot. What reason did he have to reject her? Yang Yi felt that this idea was inappropriate. Should I raise the price? Selling the most expensive coffee to scare people away? But Yang Yi didn't want to be a profiteer who only served the rich. What's more, Yang Yi didn't want to shut out music lovers like Lu Xiaoshu and Miao Chuan who couldn't afford expensive coffee. He had even considered lowering the price. These ideas obviously wouldn't work. Yang Yi suddenly thought of Yen Xiaopei. To be exact, he thought of her flower shop. This woman was very shrewd. She hired university students to work part-time in her flower shop, and the salary was much lower than that of full-time employees. Of course, Yang Yi didn't want to exploit college students, nor did he want to hire cheap labor. However, it seemed that hiring 1 or 2 employees to work in his shop was a good idea. I can give a higher salary. As long as the employee is reliable and capable, money doesn't matter. Yang Yi thought to himself. He began to imagine a scene where someone would work for him at the bar, and then he, the boss, would sit leisurely in a booth, reading the newspaper and listening to music. If he wanted to drink coffee, he would go to the bar to get a cup. How cool would that be? Just when Prison Break was on the shelves, Yang Yi's other book was also quietly on the shelves of major bookstores. Shishi's Bedtime Stories was a ridiculous name given by the cheating doll's father. Obviously, to the readers, it wasn't attractive at all. Of course, it wasn't that Sahara Publishing House didn't advertise before. but Sahara Publishing House had never touched on children's books before. In terms of copywriting, they were still playing with the adults. Many of Yang Yi's fans more or less knew about this news, but they weren't willing to buy children's books. Even when the news that Yang Yi had written a fairy tale collection spread among the fan community, many fans thought that it was a rumor and a scam. What a joke! Yang Yi can write fairy tales? This is just a fairy tale, isn't it? Someone mocked triumphantly, and many people agreed. That was not wrong. Yang Yi's impression to the fans was similar to his own. He was a burly retired soldier who was good at literature and martial arts. He might be cold and taciturn, but he was definitely not a man who liked to tell stories in a childish tone. Although the subject matter of Yang Yi's two recent books had gradually begun to blacken his image, it was still far from a fairy tale. As a result, Shishi's Bedtime Stories was met with a cold reception on the first day it was released. Fortunately, it had rich color illustrations that piqued the interest of some children who accidentally got their hands on it, and it barely sold a few copies. After a day, Sahara Publishing House calculated that there were only a few thousand copies sold nationwide. Compared to the record-setting Drawing Sword and Soldier's Assault, this book was a flop. Fu Jun attached great importance to Yang Yi's fairy tale collection project. Long before it was released, as a father, he took a sample book back home for his son to read. His son liked it very much. Then, his wife accompanied his son to read it, and she liked it very much too. Later, Fu Jun read it himself and found it quite interesting. Therefore, he had inexplicable confidence in Yang Yi's book, and thought that this fairy tale collection might be able to create miracles. After all, the reader group transcended age and gender. However, reality slapped him hard in the face. You haven't informed Yang Yi yet, have you? Fu Jun asked Mr. Liu during the meeting. Not yet. Boss, do you want me to call Yang Yi now? Mr. Liu misunderstood. No, don't tell him. Fu Jun waved his hand and said, I went to Chiyu's website and read it. His new book, Prison Break, is really well written. Although there are only 2 chapters, it made my heart itch. I want to know why Michael went to rob a bank and didn't run away quickly after stealing the money. Instead, he was caught by the police. I think there's a deeper meaning to it. Mr. Liu also read it. He had long become Yang Yi's loyal fan. Fu Jun didn't want to talk about Prison Break with them. He knocked on the table and said, Prison Break did very well. It surpassed Remaining Sins on the day it was published. This is because Chiyu did a good job in promoting it. We have to reflect on ourselves. Did we do something wrong? Yang Yi's fairy tale collection is so interesting. What did you sell it for? The worst result in the history of the publishing house? Fu Jun said in exasperation. Several department managers moved their mouths, but didn't dare to say it out loud. In fact, there were worse results in the history of the publishing house. Boss, you wrote your own autobiography, but you didn't sell many copies at all. Go back and think about it carefully. What did you do wrong? Go and take a look at how other children's books are doing their promotions and sales. I'll give you a week. I want to see the sales volume. The sales volume. Fu Jun shouted, waving his fist. And the online bookstore. Increase the publicity for this book. I think more people will buy it if it's sold online. Chapter 184. Early in the morning, after Yang Yi finished his exercise, he continued to practice his voice. Although he was not with Murphy and it was boring to practice alone, Yang Yi did not slack off. After all, he was also a man with a dream of music. Note 1. However, today, Yang Yi was pleasantly surprised to find that he had a breakthrough. The accident happened when he suddenly wanted to use his internal strength to expand his vocal cords. Just by gently injecting some internal strength into his throat, his vocal cords, which were no longer youthful, actually loosened a little. Yang Yi tried to sing a few lines and found that although it was still a little unnatural, he felt that he could now reach the range that he could not sing before. This was a good sign. After Yang Yi increased the injection of internal strength, he seemed to have stepped into a new world. A world full of music. Of course, this was very tiring, especially since this body had only been practicing internal strength for a few months. Yang Yi could not hold on for more than a few minutes. and soon his internal strength was almost exhausted. Obviously, it was impossible for him to become a peerless master who could cross in ranges through internal strength. However, the surprise was not over yet. After Yang Yi withdrew his internal strength, he could still keenly feel that although his vocal cords had returned to their original state, they were not as stiff as before. His vocal cords and vocal ligaments seemed to have a little elasticity. The change was not very obvious, but Yang Yi was very sure that it was there. There's hope. Yang Yi pondered with some surprise. Was it because when he practiced his voice every day, he added internal strength as a stimulus, and gradually, the benign change of his vocal cords would lead to a qualitative change? In the future, he would not need internal strength to sing in the range that he could not sing now? Yang Yi decided to observe for a while more before coming to a conclusion. Papa, hurry up, we're going to be late. Just after breakfast, the little girl pulled her small school bag and shouted in the living room. This was the 4th day that she went to kindergarten. She made friends, talked, and played games with her peers in the kindergarten. She was becoming more and more cheerful day by day. She was becoming less and less like the shy little girl who would stick to her father and hide behind him whenever she saw a stranger. This was a good thing. Yang Yi didn't want Shi to be like him and Murphy, who were cold and didn't have many close friends. The little guy seemed to be a little impatient, but Yang Yi was very slow. He wasn't considered slow, but after he started to enjoy the life of an ordinary person, this guy liked to do things slowly like a tortoise. He even complacently said, "This is life. Do you want to leave Dad so badly to play with Xiaoyu and your friends?" Daddy is not happy, Daddy is very sad. Yang Yi pretended to be jealous as he helped Shi pack today's lunch in a plastic bag. However, he didn't know how much of it was fake, and how much of it was sincere. Okay. Shi sighed heavily. Her shoulders drooped as if she was crushed by a heavy burden. She helplessly spread out her hands and said like a little adult, "Actually, I also want to play with Daddy, but the teacher said that children who are late for class are not obedient and have to apologize to other children. So I don't want to be late." Facing the little girl's appearance, Yang Yi couldn't help but laugh. He rubbed Shishi's little head and said dotingly, "Don't worry, Daddy won't let you be late. This is a promise from the god of racing of Mount Akina." Unfortunately, his car was Tyrannical Wolf, not Wuling Hongguang, and not the legendary Wuling Hongguang S. After sending the little girl to the kindergarten, Yang Yi began to write a recruitment notice in the morning when there weren't so many customers coming to drink coffee. For this recruitment notice, Yang Yi specially bought the 10,000-year red Xian paper for the Spring Festival, as well as a brush and ink. Among the 4 arts of zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting, his zither skills were superb, his painting skills were good, his chess skills were the most average, and his calligraphy skills were barely acceptable. He hadn't learned calligraphy for a long time. Yang Yi also found the feeling on the ordinary white paper before he wrote it on the red Xian paper in one go. Recruitment notice. Due to business needs, we are looking for 1 or 2 coffee shop employees. You can work part-time. You are required to be skilled in handmade coffee, be humble, polite, and diligent. Salary will be discussed in person. Yang Yi didn't write his name, but wrote the coffee shop on the corner. The content was very simple, and the number of words was not many, so on such a big piece of red Xian paper, Yang Yi wrote very big words, which satisfied his desire to write big words. Fortunately, he was rational and didn't have the impulse to show off the running script, so the neat regular script didn't look difficult. Yang Yi blew on the ink. While waiting for the ink to dry, he also admired the words. What an iron-like stroke. What a powerful word. He hadn't practiced much over the years, but his calligraphy hadn't fallen too far behind. At first glance, a lot of people came to apply for the job after the recruitment notice was posted. Yang Yi felt that his calligraphy would have a magical effect. But it was useless. In the afternoon, when Yang Yi closed the shop and was ready to pick up Shi, he glanced at the big red notice posted at the door of the shop. He looked forward to it all day, but there wasn't a single person who wanted to apply. If only there was one, it would be good. It was really too embarrassing. At night, after Yang Yi coaxed Shi to sleep with a story, he went to the study. He wanted to send the manuscripts and illustrations that he had saved over the past few days to Chang Zi, the editor, to help arrange the typesetting and publishing. However, when he opened his mailbox, Yang Yi saw a letter from a stranger. Yang Yi frowned. Looking at the title, he knew it was a song. Tian Mei and the others, after knowing his mailbox, were really persistent. How many emails have they sent? He didn't intend to pay attention to it, but looking at the little red dot there, Yang Yi clicked on it, and was ready to cross it. However, when he saw the content of the email, Yang Yi stopped his right index finger that was clicking the mouse. Jujia. Yang Yi's face showed a smile. This guy, just like Murphy complained to him in the past, used the name of Murphy's colleague to buy songs from him, and bought songs that Yang Yi hadn't registered the copyright. This idea was disgusting, but it was also extremely daring. In this world, copyright organizations that were supported by a lot of money were very powerful. Unless it was approved by the original author, not to mention plagiarizing other people's songs, even if it was a song written by someone else on the copyright organization's website. As long as the original author sued, all the details would be investigated by the copyright organization. Correspondingly, the person who snatched the copyright would also be severely punished. That is to say, the legendary bankruptcy and jail time. Then, wasn't Zhu Jie afraid that he would go back on his words? Walking on a tightrope, interesting. Yang Yi had some ideas in his heart, but he first sent an email to ask Zhu Jie what he wanted to do. At the end he added, "If I really sold a complete song to you, how much can you pay for the buyout?" Chapter 185. Wrong number again. It should be 710. Niu Meiling went on a business trip some time ago, but it was hard to say if she didn't dare to face Murphy and deliberately chose this time to go on a business trip to avoid the limelight. After all, people in the entertainment industry stayed in the company all day. It was abnormal to stay in the same city. After returning, Niu Meiling called her secretary over and asked in detail, "How have you been? Did she make a fuss?" This she was obviously referring to Murphy. The secretary was well aware. She shook her head and said with a little confusion, "I didn't see any movement, Sister Ling. I arranged everything according to your plan. But Mo Shaowan didn't seem to have any reaction." The secretary mentioned Mo Shaowan because Mo Shaowan was Murphy's representative in a sense, and this girl had a violent temper. Usually, if Murphy had any grievances, Mo Shaowan would make the most of it. They didn't complain that the music producer wasn't Duan Shurong? Niu Meiling asked doubtfully. The secretary shook her head and said, "They didn't complain. They seemed to be quite satisfied with their new music producer. They have officially started recording today." Niu Meiling was a little surprised. She felt that there was no reason for Murphy not to make a fuss. Duan Shurong had worked with Murphy for many years, but was arranged to be with Zhenzhen. Even if Murphy wasn't angry, she should have complained a little, right? But looking at the secretary's appearance, it seemed that Murphy really didn't care at all. "The new producer, who did you find later?" Niu Meiling asked with a frown. The secretary said, "Jin Yingming." Seeing Niu Meiling's confused look, it was obvious that she had never heard of this name. The secretary quickly explained, "We followed your request to find a freelance producer who wasn't famous but had a flawless resume. This Jin Yingming met the requirements. After all, 10 years ago he produced an album for someone else that almost won the Chinese Golden Album Award, but after that he didn't have any results." "No results in 10 years? Niu Meiling was a little surprised. The secretary smiled and said, "Yes, his performance can be said to be very bad. When we found him, he was about to sell his house in Shanghai to pay for the studio's utilities." Niu Meiling was relieved now. She smiled gently and said, "Since she didn't come to make trouble, then it's a good thing. I still hope that Mo Fei can be calm and concentrate on making music. What's the point of playing around all day long?" In her opinion, Murphy finding Mu Ziong to write songs for her was treason and disobeying the arrangement. Murphy was in the company recording songs with Jin Yingming and a few instrument experts. However, the person that Sister Ling was worried about, Mo Shaowan, was not in the recording studio. She did not come to the company today and asked for leave from Murphy. However, Mo Shawan did not rest at home as she had said. She secretly drove the car to a deserted street in Tingshan district. Wearing a cap, she sneakily got out of the car and tiptoed toward the phone booth. A tall man was standing at the phone booth. When he heard the movement, he looked over at her brother-in-law. Seeing that she could not scare Yang Yi, she stopped tiptoeing and ran over with a smile. That's right, the tall man was Yang Yi. Although it was already autumn, he was still wearing a t-shirt and pants as usual. He was very casual. Why are you being so secretive? Just go to my coffee shop, or I can bring it to Tianmei for you. Yang Yi frowned and asked Mo Shawan. Mo Shawan rolled her eyes and said in a bad mood, Big brother, this is a secret operation. Opening a studio has to be done in secret. If Sister Ling finds out, Sister Fei will be in trouble. Yang Yi thought about it and agreed. He didn't say much and directly took out a bank card from his pocket. He had already transferred 10 million yuan into it. It was the remuneration from last month's book sales, and the profit from the sales of physical books in the Sahara. The password is 666,666, which is 6 sixes. Currently, there is only 10 million. You can first deal with the needs of the early stage and the subsequent funds. When the copyright of the TV series is in the account, I will transfer the money to your card. Yang Yi said briefly. Mo Shawan got the bank card and smiled as if she was holding a piece of gold. She happily said, Okay. Since she was in the mood, Mo Shawan told Yang Yi about her plan. First of all, during this time, I will find a house to rent and settle our early people. Why don't you buy it? Just buy a building for the studio. Yang Yi interrupted. Mo Shawan rolled her eyes and said, Big brother, the houses in the coastal area are very expensive, okay? Do you think it's Tingshan district? Then come to Tingshan district to buy. I think Murphy will also be very happy to work near home. Yang Yi said firmly. Mo Shawan was stunned. She hesitated and said, Tingshan district? But will it be inconvenient? Most of the people who work in the entertainment industry in Jiangsheng are concentrated in the coastal area. If it's inconvenient to go to work, then buy a commuter car and hire a driver to pick you up. Yang Yi waved his hand. Money is not a problem. Mo Shawan did not have much of an opinion. For a celebrity studio, there was indeed no special need to say where to settle down. After all, they were only serving Murphy, and Murphy would not be fixed to work in one place. After all, big stars had to fly all over the country. Expanding to a national scale, this way, there was no difference between Tingshan district and the coastal area. Moreover, Mo Shawan was also a little moved by Yang Yi's suggestion. Buying a building for the company's real estate, just thinking about it made her happy. Okay, then I'll look for it in Tingshan district. Mo Shawan made up her mind, nodded and said, But it can't be placed near the school. I have to find a place that's convenient and not easy to provoke the paparazzi. Also, buying a building, renovating it, and installing a recording studio are a lot of things. Mo Shawan said a lot, as if it was very trivial and irritating, but in fact, her expression was not irritated at all. Instead, she was eager to try and take action immediately. Do you need me to go with you? Yang Yi asked. Mo Shawan seemed to be frightened. She quickly waved her hand and said, No, I can do it myself, and Xiao Ai will accompany me. After that, she grabbed the bank card and ran away, leaving a confused Yang Yi behind. However, Yang Yi was relieved. Yang Yi, of course, had no intention of working together with Mo Shawan. He was still a little uncomfortable with this woman's character, so he just asked politely. Yang Yi did not know that Mo Shawan, who ran away, was still criticizing him. There's something wrong with this brother-in-law. First, he called me in the middle of the night, and then he took the initiative to help me. I'm afraid that something will happen. It's better to keep a distance. I can't make Sister Fei sad. Our Xiao Ai is still the best. She resigned without hesitation, and now she can help me run errands full-time. Hee, if you want to give her an extra drumstick, you have to double her salary first. Chapter 186. Since he did not go with his sister-in-law to look at the house, Yang Yi returned to the coffee shop. The red notice seemed to be effective. When a beautiful female student came to buy coffee, she saw the notice and ran over to Yang Yi with interest. "Boss, are you really hiring here?" The beautiful female student asked in high spirits. "My name is Zhou Yu, can I apply?" Yang Yi raised his eyelids, looked at the other party, nodded his head and said, "In." "Then boss, what do you think of me? I guarantee that it will attract more customers to your coffee shop." Zhou Yu used her lily-white hands to stroke the hair on her temples and charmingly winked at Yang Yi. The commotion here also attracted the attention of the two nearby tables. Some female students curled their lips in disdain while some male students' eyes lit up. They could not help but look at Zhou Yu's slim figure. Yang Yi sized up the other party, but his expression did not change. He only lightly said, "Nothing much." Zhou Yu was stunned for a moment. Her fingers were glued to her ears, and she forgot to put them down. How could there be a man who was indifferent to her teasing? Zhou Yu was, after all, the most beautiful girl in the school. This was also judged by her classmates. "Why?" Zhou Yu unwillingly asked. Looking at the notice, "I want to be proficient in handmade coffee. Do you know how to make it?" Yang Yi asked. Zhou Yu naturally nodded her head and said, "Of course I know how to make coffee. Isn't it just tearing open the packaging, pouring it into a cup, then brewing it with boiling water and stirring it? It's that simple." Yang Yi indifferently looked at the other party. Beside them, there were already people who could not help but burst out laughing. "Did I say something wrong?" Zhou Yu turned around and looked at that person and unhappily asked. Of course. That was a female student. She would not spoil Zhou Yu. She proudly raised her head and said, "Boss is talking about using coffee beans to grind and brew coffee, not your instant coffee powder. We're also here for the boss's handmade coffee. Who would want to drink your instant coffee?" Zhou Yu was furious. She stomped her feet and turned to Yang Yi saying, "All right, boss. Even if I was wrong, I don't have to do this. I can help you bring the coffee over." If she had said that she was willing to learn, Yang Yi would have thought better of her. However, the feeling that Zhou Yu gave Yang Yi was that she was very frivolous. It was as if she had not applied for the job because she wanted to experience life and the novelty of being a waitress. Yang Yi ignored Zhou Yu's pitiful and coquettish expression, shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, Miss Zhou, please go back." Zhou Yu immediately felt that he had lost face after being rejected so cleanly, and without leaving any room for negotiation. He stomped his feet and left after saying, "Humph, you snob. I won't come here again." Yang Yi did not even look at her back. He calmly stood behind the bar and wiped the cups. A few customers began to discuss with interest. Among them, a beautiful girl seemed to empathize with Zhou Yu's feelings. She said to her companion with lingering fear, "The boss is so fierce." "He is a little fierce, but he's not fierce to women. He's just adhering to his principles. I think it's pretty cool," her companion said with a smile. Yang Yi did not pay attention to their discussion. He wiped the cups and thought, "Should I hire some official employees? University students probably wouldn't be able to do this kind of work for long. Moreover, if they were all like Zhou Yu and had a playful attitude, then he would not be hiring an employee to help him share the burden, but a master instead. Just like the 3 British short hairs at his feet, they were the little masters. Usually, it was Shishi who took them to play in the shop. Now that Shishi had gone to kindergarten, the 3 little masters could only harass Yang Yi. Right now they were gnawing on Yang Yi's slippers. However, Yang Yi still had a way to deal with them. He took out a fluffy ball of yarn from his pocket and shook it, attracting the attention of the 3 little fellows. "Go." Yang Yi smiled and rolled the ball of yarn out of the bar. Suddenly, the 3 little guys who were watching blankly had completed the transformation from stillness to action. Little Gray was the most active. It jumped out, and Dodo and Xiaoguai did not show any weakness. Following closely behind, the 3 little blue figures hurriedly chased after the little ball of yarn. Prison Break was in the midst of a popular serialization. From the plot the day before yesterday, the readers had already learned from the conversation between Michael and his brother, Lincoln, that Michael had put himself in prison in order to save his brother from prison. The chapter that was updated yesterday was also intense enough. Through a series of ingenious plans, Michael even set up the former mafia boss, the current prison boss, John Abruz, to make himself work in the prison factory as a punishment. That way, he would have the opportunity to get close to his brother and work with him. Although today's plot was not exciting, it still shocked the readers. Have you seen the blueprint of the prison structure? Lincoln was a little surprised, but he still didn't quite believe Michael. Just as Lincoln turned to see what Michael was doing, he was surprised to see Michael take off his shirt. His originally clean and white upper body was now covered with colorful tattoos. Not only have I seen it. Michael's lips curled up, and he said proudly, I've already drawn it on my body. The chapter had come to an end, but the reader still saw a new illustration. It was Michael facing Lincoln. He had a smug smile on his face, and his upper body was naked. It was as if the dark blue tattoo was his underwear. This was the first time the tattoo on the front was made public. But what excited the readers the most was that the tattoo that had puzzled them for a long time finally revealed its purpose. It turned out to be the blueprint of the prison structure. The reviewers were already cheering excitedly. Did you see it? Did you see it? We already said in August that Yang Yi's drawings were definitely not done casually. There's a deeper meaning to them, right? Those who said that these were all gimmicks have been slapped in the face, haven't they? However, not many people were willing to pay attention to these reviewers who had not actually investigated anything. The readers in the book review section were discussing how these tattoos could be seen as the blueprint of the prison structure. Some busybodies zoomed in on the front and back of the tattoo and took screenshots. They placed them in the book review section for the top students who had studied civil engineering to analyze. However, even the top students were confused. I can't tell. Where is the blueprint? These were taken to the universities to find professors and experts to study, but they could not come up with an answer in a short time. How can you mortals see through such a mysterious pattern with just a glance? Some people supported Yang Yi, but their reasons were also very reasonable. If it was so easy to see through, Michael would have been forced to remove the tattoo before he entered the prison, right? Yes, if that was the case, the series would be over. In any case, the serialization of Prison Break had already surpassed Yuzue in popularity. It was not only their own online novel readers who started reading Prison Break. More and more people were recommended to read Prison Break, and then plunged in, unable to get rid of it. Sure enough, the only person who can defeat Yang Yi is Yang Yi himself. Some readers joked. Chapter 187. When the weekend arrived, Shishi was also on vacation. Yang Yi, who had been busy for a few days, decided to give himself a vacation. He mainly wanted to accompany his daughter, so he willfully closed the coffee shop. However, he did not follow the example of a certain Mr. Yuan, and put a note on the door of the shop to ask for leave. He didn't even want to find an excuse. To Yang Yi's surprise, Murphy also came over. Murphy, who had thought it through, also suspended the recording work. She took advantage of the weekend to reunite with Shishi and Yang Yi for 2 days. In the past, Murphy was a workaholic. When she was preparing for her comeback album, she really stayed in the recording studio day and night. She even had to take time to send Shishi to Yang Yi's house. I don't know why. Maybe after experiencing failure, I understood that music also needs to be done slowly. The people who criticized me were right. Slow work produces fine work. When Murphy answered Yang Yi's doubts, she herself was a little confused. She leaned against the fence, looked at the starry night sky, and continued to murmur, maybe it's because I now realize that music and family are actually equally important. I don't want to put all my energy into work and neglect my daughter's growth. What about me? Yang Yi hugged Murphy from behind and interlocked his fingers with hers. Hee. Murphy was not confused at this time, but she shrank her head playfully, squeezed into Yang Yi's arms and said, Is it because of you? Guess. Yang Yi's arms were still very warm. On Saturday they stayed at home, listening to Shishi's kindergarten story, and playing with the 3 little British shorthairs. Then in the evening, after Shishi fell asleep, Yang Yi and Murphy had a romantic time again. Originally, they were already in love with each other, and they had already done what they needed to do. Moreover, it was not like the last time when they had Murphy as a relative. It was inevitable that something would go wrong between them. The story of this starry night was indescribable. On Sunday, the refreshed Yang Yi had a special arrangement. Let's climb Pavilion Mountain and have a barbecue there. Yang Yi had prepared all the ingredients, equipment, and charcoal for the barbecue early in the morning. Okay. Cece was the most supportive. She jumped up and down and cheered. I love going there to play the most. But barbecue in the mountains, won't it cause a fire? Murphy, whose face was rosy, was fiddling with the wind and rain flower she bought yesterday. She asked worriedly as she sprayed the flower. There is indeed such a risk. Yang Yi smiled and said, but don't worry, I'm an expert in cooking in the mountains. With me here, there is no risk. But I'm a little worried about you. Can you walk? Yang Yi walked over worriedly. He pressed Murphy's shoulder and asked softly. Murphy still felt a little unnatural when she woke up in the morning. Although it was not the first time, and she had given birth to a child, it had been too long since she did it. Yang Yi also tossed around for a whole night. I can walk, why can't I walk? Murphy was so scared by Yang Yi's words that she did not dare to raise her head to look at her daughter. She reached out and hammered Yang Yi's chest. She whispered, do you want to die, saying this in front of our daughter? Yang Yi scratched his head and laughed. I'd better change the route. Let's not climb the mountain. I'll drive into the mountain. I want to go. I want to go. She shouted to announce her existence. She was so excited that her little face was flushed. Of course we want to go. Today your papa must cook delicious food. He must be responsible for us. Murphy smiled and hugged Shishi. She kissed her and said meaningfully. Just as Murphy was packing up the clothes and Yang Yi was arranging the barbecue ingredients, Shishi ran over again. Papa, can we take Xiao Guai and the others with us? The little girl was still very thoughtful. At this moment, she took her father's hand and asked a little worriedly, if we are not at home, Xiao Guai and the others will be very scared. Yang Yi patted Shishi's little head and smiled gently. Of course, we have to take Xiao Guai and the others with us. But Shishi, can you shoulder the responsibility of taking care of them? They definitely had to take the kittens with them, because after Yang Yi and the others set off, they would play for almost the whole day. If the kittens were left at home, they would probably be starving during the day. Shishi was very happy when she heard this. The little girl puffed out her chest, tightened her little face, and promised seriously. I can, Papa. I will take good care of Xiao Guai and the others. The book was right. Don't treat children as children who don't know anything. Give them some small tasks that are within their ability, and they can create unexpected surprises for adults. After a while, Yang Yi carried the big hiking bag to the living room. He was surprised to see that Shishi was stuffing the kitten's things into her small bag. At the same time, the three little British shorthairs were either lying, sitting, or walking around the little girl, looking up. Why are you packing the kitten's toys? Yang Yi came over, glanced at them, and asked with a smile. Yang Yi took out a fluffy little cloth mouse and played with it in his hand. This immediately attracted the kitten's attention. Even Dodo turned over from the ground and stood up, staring at the little cloth mouse that was rolling in the air with its big eyes. Shishi didn't let it go. She jumped up, pulled her father's hand and grabbed it. Papa, don't do it. It wasn't easy for me to pack it up. Are you going to take it outside for them to play with? Yang Yi saw his daughter nodding, so he smiled and touched the little girl's head. You don't have to take too much. We're just going out for a while. They won't be able to play with that much. Shishi's big eyes were a little confused. She scratched her head, pouted, and said, Then what should we do? Come on, Papa will pack it up for you. Let's take a few toys, the cat food that they ate at noon, and the milk that the kittens want to drink. Yang Yi comforted the little girl, and then helped her take out some toys that the big cats didn't need. On the table, a small shuttlecock that the kittens were playing with accidentally rolled down, and immediately caused a big fight between the three kittens. Hee hee, Xiaoguai, come on Xiaoguai, come on. Shishi's attention was attracted. The little girl didn't have time to watch her father pack, and turned to join the fight. As a cheerleader, she not only didn't act as a referee, but also often helped Xiaoguai fight. At around 10 o'clock in the morning, they finally set off. Yang drove the car, carrying Murphy, Shishi, and the 3 kittens in cages in the trunk, to the depths of Tingshan Mountain. Tingshan Mountain was both small and big. The small one was Tingshan Mountain, which bordered Jiangqing Media University. This was the main mountain, but it wasn't as tall as Mount Huangshan or Mount Tai. It was just a small mountain peak. It was reasonable to say that it was big, because the entire Tingshan Mountain was a small mountain range. Behind it were continuous mountain ranges and valleys, forming a small mountain range with Tingshan Mountain as the head. The place that Yang Yi drove to was another relatively flat mountain range. Currently, there was a mountain road, but the corresponding scenic area hadn't been built yet. There were few people, and it was a good place to drive. On the road, there was only Tyrannical Wolf's car on the winding road. Yang Yi opened the windows and even opened the roof, and the wind really started to blow. Murphy, who had recovered very quickly, and no longer felt any discomfort, sat in the back seat with Shishi. They were in a good mood. Murphy even clapped her hands and sang a ballad to Shishi. Time passes slowly, you go slowly, I want to accompany my baby in a small boat, flowing along the river. The little girl also clapped her hands, her face full of smiles as she shook her head to the beat. Yang Yi drove the car with a smile on his face as he listened quietly. The ballad, which wasn't considered famous in this world, was actually melodious and moving when sung by Murphy's clear and gentle voice. It wasn't known if the cicadas in this mountain had reached the end of their lives because autumn had arrived, or if they were intoxicated by the song, but they didn't make a sound. A warm breeze blew past, and only the rustling of the leaves could be heard, echoing the song from afar. Chapter 188. Autumn had just arrived, and the forest was still green. The dyed forest mentioned in the book had not yet appeared. Only the occasional falling leaves had a trace of autumn yellow. But before it floated to the ground, it was caught by a big hand. Yang Yi carried a heavy backpack and walked at the back. He casually tore the fallen leaves that he grabbed, peeled them off bit by bit, and left the veins. He wrapped them around his finger like a ring, and then casually threw them aside. This was a bad habit left by his childhood training in the jungle in his previous life. Whether it was to pass time or to relieve the pressure of life and death, this bad habit was still very smooth. However, it was just reminiscing. Looking at the 2 beautiful flowers in front of him. One was a big blooming white azalea, and the other was a small and cute orange jasmine. Yang Yi felt that this life was just right for him. This place is almost there. Yang Yi stopped Murphy and Shishi and smiled. It's too close to the stream, so it's a bit wet. The place that Yang Yi chose was not too far from the road, and the car could still be seen from the side of the road. More importantly, there was a stream flowing down from the mountain. Yang Yi could hear the movement from afar. It was more convenient to wash up near the stream. I want to play in the water. Shishi looked at the trickling stream dozens of meters away, and said coquettishly while holding her mother's hand. That's not possible. You promised Dad that you would take care of the kittens. Yang Yi took off the cat cage that was hung on the backpack, and pointed at the kittens that were moving around restlessly. Cece pouted. She was a little reluctant, but she still said, okay. However, there was still a 3-year-old Mo here. It's okay to play for a while. Let Dad take care of them first. Anyway, they can't run away from the cage. I wonder if there are any small fish in the stream. Let's go catch some for the kitten. Murphy rolled her eyes. She put down her backpack and approached Yang Yi's backpack. Then she giggled and pulled Shishi's little hand. Although she knew that a 2-month-old kitten couldn't eat it, it could still be used as an excuse. Thinking about the cool stream flowing over her feet, Murphy's childishness was aroused. Good. Cats love fish the most. Shishi hurriedly put down the cat cage on the ground and pushed it towards her father. She pleaded, Papa, can you help Shishi look after Xiao Guai and the others? The little girl's tone was very sincere, and she even used her invincible big watery eyes. Yang Yi couldn't resist. He helplessly waved his hand and said, Go and play. Murphy, you have to hold Shishi's hand. The pebbles may be slippery. Yang Yi couldn't help but remind her. In fact, he could see that the stream was very shallow. It might be the kind that just covered the ankles. But as a parent, how could he not be worried? I know. Murphy pulled Shishi, who was giggling, and ran out. Yang shook his head. He found a few stones nearby and started to build a stove. Today's outdoor barbecue was actually much better than in his previous life. Other than needing to find materials to build a stove, the other things like charcoal, barbed wire, forks, and so on were all ready-made. They were still in his big hiking bag. Shishi, come here. It's comfortable to step on here. It won't hurt your feet. Mo Fei's happy voice came from the other side of the stream, mixed with the little girl's silvery laughter. Yang Yi turned his head and looked. Under the rays of sunlight through the forest, Murphy and Shishi were playing barefoot in the water. Sometimes, Murphy would step on the water and splash it on Shishi's face. The cold feeling made the little girl cry out, but she also felt that it was very interesting. After a while, she stepped on the water even harder. Yang Yi smiled and continued to build a stove. He also used small stones to fill in the big gaps. When Mo Fei and Cici had enough fun, the little girl came back screaming at the top of her lungs. At this time, there was already white smoke curling up. Yang Yi was covering the barbed wire fence, waiting for the charcoal to turn red. And then he would put the ingredients on it. Wow, you're amazing. Murphy came over and looked and exclaimed in surprise. It's only been a while and you've already started the fire? When my papa used to make barbecue, it took him a long time to do it. Later, he bought an electric barbecue grill and made do with it. Mom's papa is Shishi's grandfather. The little girl introduced dutifully to her father. She was afraid that her father would not understand. I'm not talking about papa. Yang Yi smiled faintly and said, is there even a need to ask? Otherwise, how dare I call myself an expert in front of you? Do you need my help? Murphy rolled up her sleeves and asked excitedly. Yang Yi remembered the time when she suddenly wanted to go to the kitchen to make a poached egg for Shishi's breakfast. A black object appeared in his mind, so he shook his head firmly. No, I'll make the barbecue. You just wait and eat. Well, expert Yang, you have to do it well. I want to eat delicious roasted chicken legs, roasted eggplants, and roasted steamed buns. Although Murphy said that, she still helped Yang Yi take out the ingredients from the hiking bag and spread them on the canvas mat next to him. Shishi was playing with the kittens, but when she heard her mother say those things, she almost drooled. Murphy spread out the picnic cloth and laid it flat on the grass. This was a place for everyone to rest when they were tired of eating, drinking, and playing later. However, Shishi carried the cat cage and enjoyed it first. She opened the cat cage and let out Xiao Guai, Dodo, and Xiao Hui. Although these three little guys were not timid, they were very clingy to Shishi. Shishi even took out cat toys from her small school bag, and the kittens played on the picnic cloth. Murphy was not idle either. She took out the cat's food bowl and poured cat food for them. Not long after, the tempting smell of meat floated from Yang Yi's side, mixed with the strong and stimulating aroma of cumin powder and black pepper powder. Shishi's stomach growled when she smelled it, and she could not help but sneeze twice. Murphy walked over, and Yang Yi raised his head and said to her with a smile, "It's still a while, it's not done yet." He thought that Murphy was waiting impatiently. However, Murphy squatted down beside him, took a small handkerchief, and wiped the sweat on Yang Yi's face. She smiled and said, "I'm afraid that you'll be cooked." In fact, Murphy's heart ached when she saw Yang Yi making barbecue. The 187-meter-tall man squatted in front of a small stove in the wild, and the thick smoke from the barbecue was sometimes in the east and sometimes in the west. When the wind blew, it enveloped Yang Yi, making him choke and feel very uncomfortable. "Don't choke with me here." Yang Yi smiled and said, "Go and play with Shishi, and we can eat barbecue later." "You're chasing me away." Murphy pouted and pretended to be unhappy. "You're unhappy." Yang Yi looked at her red lips and could not help it. He secretly looked in the direction of Shishi, and the little girl did not look in his direction, so he became bolder. Yang Yi turned his head and kissed Murphy's red lips, and then pretended that nothing had happened. He turned around and used a bamboo stick to remove the tin foil wrapped around the enoki mushroom, leaving only the blushing Murphy. "Yang Yi." Mo Fei let out a reproachful cry. She blushed, but she didn't have time to beat Yang Yi with her small fists. Instead, she looked in Cici's direction anxiously. This intimacy was actually nothing. but she was afraid that her daughter would see it. Chapter 189. What's so great about barbecue? My dad often cooks barbecue for us on the balcony. It was already a new week. In the kindergarten, Shishi was excitedly telling her friends about her experience with her parents in Tingshan over the weekend. Chun Shuryan, who was tall and big, pretended to be disdainful and expressed her sense of existence. He can roast chicken legs. I can eat too. I really envy you. Nan Zhaoyu, the quiet and gentle little boy who recited poems, was hugging his legs and mumbling, "My mom always says that I can't eat too much junk food, so she won't let me eat this and won't let me eat that." After a week of exercise, young Luochi gradually changed from the introverted and shy girl at the beginning. She would now share her inner thoughts with her friends. "My mom also doesn't let me eat barbecue, and I have to eat more vegetables so that I won't get fat." Inadvertently, these words hurt the chubby little girl next to her, Lan Xian. However, how could Lan Xian be so narrow-minded? She didn't care at all, and her attention was completely focused on the delicious food she was talking about. My dad also made a lot of vegetables. He wrapped them in white and shiny paper and roasted them. There are also big eggplants, which are very fragrant. As Cece spoke, she suddenly thought of something. Her big eyes sparkled as she looked at Chun Shuryan and said, "By the way, there's also cotton candy. The cotton candy that Chun Shuryan brought for us today, my papa also roasted it." Cotton candy can also be roasted? Chun Shuryan, who found that she couldn't become the center of attention even if she stood up, was discouraged. She sat back and asked in surprise, "Cotton candy barbecue?" When these two words were connected, her friends all focused on Shishi. "Yes. It's delicious," Shishi recalled and couldn't help but stick out her pink little tongue to lick her mouth. My dad roasted the cotton candy and then used 2 biscuits and chocolate to pick it up. It's sticky, sweet, and super delicious. Hearing the little girl's words, her friends all started drooling. Lan Xian couldn't hold it in any longer. She swallowed a mouthful of saliva and touched her bulging belly. She pursed her lips and said, I just finished eating. I feel hungry again." Fortunately, she did not need to be tortured anymore. "Little kids, it's time to take a nap." Teacher Mu walked in, clapped his hands, and said with a gentle smile, interrupting the little fellow's discussion. The story of Prison Break was getting more and more exciting, especially after the appearance of the iconic character Teabag. Unlike other novels where the reader had to rely on their imagination, Prison Break, written by Yang Yi, was interspersed with rich illustrations. In this chapter, there was an illustration of Teabag. Yang Yi almost used a sketch to draw the image of the character played by Robert Knapp, a fierce man with thin cheeks and prominent cheekbones. He had messy hair, a beard that could not be trimmed but was still shaved a little sexily, and a pair of terrifying eyes. Those eyes were not fierce, but they were very evil. One could see the mockery in his turbid eyes, as if all the people and things in the world were under his perverted control. There was a lot of controversy about this character in the book review section. Most readers expressed their disgust for him immediately. After all, Teabag was put in prison for pedophilia, rape, and murder. Thinking of what he had done in the past, the readers shuddered. What was even more disgusting was his appearance. It was written in the book. Behind Teabag was a man with exquisitely groomed hair. He had a feminine smile and disdain on his face. He snuggled up to Teabag like a little bird, his fingers tightly gripping the corner of Teabag's trouser pocket as he followed Teabag's every step. Although it was a description of Teabag's boy toy, it also reflected Teabag's twisted personality. In prison, he used men to satisfy his sexual needs. Seeing him, the book review section almost exploded. Most of the active reviewers were criticizing this character and Yang Yi. "It's so disgusting. Why write such a character? I threw up last night's dinner. Can't you just write the plot of Michael rescuing his brother, and then the two of them reunited happily outside the prison? Do you have to do this and that to disgust us readers? I just want to know, how many chapters can this Teabag live in this book? If there are more of his plots, I won't read it anymore. I'm abandoning the book." Is it necessary to lower the IQ of the supporting characters to this extent? With Teabag's small stature, there are people in prison who can whittle him down to a stick at any time. How can he be the boss? I think Yang Yi's brain is damaged. He wrote such a character to disgust us. Boss, hurry up and delete him before he appears in a few chapters. MMP, I hate rapists the most in my life. He's also a psycho who likes men. Why is the protagonist still talking to him? Is he going to work with him in the future? Looks like it. Let me guess, the protagonist is forced to work with Teabag and has to contribute his own flour. Haha, the author is retarded. In this one-sided scolding, there were still people who came out to say a few words of justice. The author naturally has his own deep meaning in setting up this character. What are you guys shouting about here? Young, come. Here's the pen, you guys write. I don't think there's anything wrong with Teabag. There are so many psychos in prison. Don't tell me you guys want all the prisoners in a prison to be pure white flowers? Boss Yang's skills are improving day by day, and the character creation is getting better and better. It doesn't matter, you guys can scold as much as you want. The more you scold, the more successful the character creation of Teabag is. Teabag, the mafia bossabras, and the protagonist's dorm mate named Sucre. You may find the existence of these people annoying, but these are all reasonable. They are all possible characters in prison, and at the same time, they are also necessary for the plot, which is to create trouble for the protagonist in the constant conflict. How can a prison break be smooth? But it couldn't be helped. Readers with their own stubborn ideas would not care about the internal logic of the author's creation of the story. They would use their own prejudices to view this world. That's not the way to create trouble. Write a psycho to disgust the readers? Even if you write some extremely vicious criminals, it's still reasonable to catch the protagonist and beat him up. Why do you have to write such a psycho? The most hated people in prison are rapists. If a person like Teabag was in reality, he would have been beaten to death by the people in prison. If you ask me, there's a problem with this setting. We're not scolding Teabag, we're scolding the author. Those who are washing the floor, look carefully. Author, if you're still writing about Teabag, hurry up and let Lincoln escape, then we won't subscribe anymore. What kind of rubbish book is this? It's so annoying. The protagonist has such a high IQ. Why doesn't he devise a plan to kill Teabag? Or tell the warden? He has such a good relationship with the warden. I can't stand it. It lowers my IQ. I'm abandoning the book. Goodbye. However, Yang Yi did not look at the book review section. Prison Break was still updating according to the original plan without any changes. At the same time as the story progressed, Prison Break became more and more exciting. The book review section was full of criticism, but it could not stop its popularity. This was a phenomenal novel destined to break records. Chapter 190. As the sun set in the west, Fatty returned from his target practice. We had live ammunition. I could also shoot 2 rounds. Bang bang, the sound was really loud. Guazi, who had just returned from military training, ran to the coffee shop at the corner of the street to look for Yang Yi. He proudly talked about his military training experience. After a few days of military training, the little fatty had become darker and thinner. Other than his round face, the fat on his body had decreased by a lot. Yang Yi smiled as he wiped his cup and listened quietly. It's a pity that the food was a little bad. Otherwise, I might have stayed in the military camp and never come back. The little fatty recalled the years of military training, and said with emotion. The sound system in the coffee shop was playing Chun Ijia's song, which made the little fatty remember something. He smiled and said, "That's right." Later on, during our performance, there were a lot of people who wanted to sign up to sing the song you wrote for Chun Ijia. Sure. Yang Yi glared at Guazi. He looked around. Luckily, the customers were sitting a little far away, so no one was paying attention to the conversation here. Guazi shrunk his head and smiled embarrassedly. That's right, I forgot. I have to keep a low profile. Then you didn't perform anything? Yang Yi asked curiously. From his understanding of Guazi, This guy still liked to express himself, especially on stage. I did. But it wasn't singing, Guazi proudly said. I organized my classmates to perform a sketch about life in the military camp. The script was even made by me. On the day of the performance, it won the cheers of the audience. It was even better than those people from the acting department. Well, he still hadn't let go of the resentment in his heart. From time to time, he would compete with the people from the acting department. Sorry, I want to buy coffee. Just as Guazi was rambling on about his military training, a tired female voice sounded from behind him. Guazi turned around in surprise. A trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. She was a very delicate and pretty girl. She wasn't tall and had short hair. To be precise, she had a straight bangs that made her look like a student. She looked clean and tidy and had a retro vibe to her. What was interesting was that she was holding a few books in her hands and was dressed in black and white. This made her look even more historical. Meeting Guazi's gaze, the girl frowned slightly and looked at Guazi with a questioning gaze. You do it, you do it. Guazi quickly smiled and stepped aside. The girl no longer paid any attention to Guazi. She walked up to Yang Yi and said indifferently, I want a cup of Robusta to go. Wait a moment. Yang Yi nodded and began to work. While waiting, the girl was just looking at the decorations in the coffee shop. She inadvertently turned her head and saw Guazi leaning against the bar counter next to her with a burning gaze. This was awkward. The girl frowned and looked at Guazi with some disgust. Guazi was embarrassed. That. I'm looking at the books you're holding. Guazi had a flash of inspiration and found a reason. Roth's 3 Laws of Acting. I've read it. Among the books the girl was holding, there was indeed a 3 Laws of Acting, written by the famous theatrical performer Roth. This reason was still acceptable. The girl retracted the hostility in her eyes. However, she didn't have any intention of talking more with Guazi. She only said, N. After Yang Yi wrapped her coffee, she turned around and left. Yang Yi didn't plan to expose Guazi's disguise, but he was full of enthusiasm. After the girl left, Guazi couldn't wait to whisper to Yang Yi, Du Yuanlei, a talented girl from the directing department of the Film Academy. She's both talented and beautiful. She's also a graduate student this year, and is in the same batch as me. Graduate student? Yang Yi was a little surprised. Then he smiled and patted the little fatty's shoulder. Then forget it. It's better if you don't have any ideas about her. Why? Guazi suddenly asked with dissatisfaction. He liked this type of girl, who was delicate and pretty. Because of the age gap. Yang Yi counted with his fingers. You're in your first year of university, while others are in graduate school. Normally, she should be 22 or 23 years old, but you're only 16 years old. 6 or 7 years difference. Isn't this gap a bit big? If it were you, when you're in graduate school, you could find a freshman as your girlfriend. Are you serious? Wait until I'm in graduate school to fall in love. Guazi said dejectedly. Is it wrong to go to university early? Actually, I don't think age is a problem. Yang Yi thought about it carefully and felt that Guazi was right. He smiled and patted Guazi's shoulder and said, Well, I hope you can pursue your senior if you really have such firm confidence. I don't have confidence. Guazi wailed. Brother Yang, please advise. After joking around for a while, Guazi said with interest, Brother Yang, I think your coffee shop is getting more and more popular. It's only been a while, and there are already several waves of customers. But I still hope that there will be fewer people. If there are too many customers, I won't be able to entertain them all. Yang Yi pursed his lips and gestured to the door. Didn't I put up a recruitment notice? I want to hire 1 or 2 employees and let them do it. Then I'll be free. There's a notice? I'll go take a look. Guazi said in surprise. He really didn't pay attention to it before. Now he turned his head and ran to take a look. After a while, Guazi ran back excitedly. Brother Yang, do you need people who know how to make coffee? Can they do it if they don't know anything? Yang Yi looked at him and shook his head. You can't do it. You're such a lazy guy. The person who is hired must be a big boss. Why would it be me? Guazi laughed. I'm a man who wants to be a movie king. How can I have time to work for you? I mean my senior, she's a good person. It's just that her family background is not good. She needs to work to earn money. Didn't I tell you last time that I went to the bar to play on the day I came to report? My senior is a cleaner in that bar. It's very hard. I think if you want to hire people, why don't you let my senior try? So that a girl like her won't have to work in a bar. It's very dangerous. Guazi was a chivalrous person. Senior? Yang Yi frowned. He looked at Guazi and said suspiciously, could it be that she's your admirer? Don't use my matter to do favors for you. I want to hire coffee shop staff, not for you to hire beautiful women. Guazi complained. How can it be? Senior Ding is not good looking. She's dark and thin. How can I like her? It's mainly because she helped me a lot when school started. I also want to help her. To be honest, my senior has a good character. She can bear hardships and is serious and active. It's just that she doesn't know how to make coffee. How can she have the money to drink coffee? Guazi seriously recommended. Yang Yi nodded slightly and said, if that's the case, as long as she's willing to learn, I can teach her. It's settled. Guazi excitedly left Yang Yi and ran back to school to find her senior. They made an appointment to come to Yang Yi's coffee shop for an interview the next day. Chapter 191. Goodbye Shishi. Goodbye, Xian Air. Goodbye Shishi. Goodbye Jiayu. Goodbye Shishi and Shishi's father. Goodbye Chen Shiyin. Well, goodbye to you too. Yang Yi held his daughter's little hand and nodded gently with a smile. Now almost every time he picked up and dropped off Shishi, Yang Yi would encounter such a situation. There were many children saying goodbye to Shishi. The little girl had surpassed Chen Shiyin and became the new generation's king. Of course, Shishi walked a completely different path from Chen Shiyin. Chen Shiyin was a little violent, but the little girl used her charm to attract people's love. Yang Yi was a little surprised every time. After all, Shishi used to play freely at home and was very shy outside. He didn't expect that the little girl would become cheerful and outgoing after more than a week in kindergarten. But this change was good. Today, on the way home, Shishi, as usual, sweetly told her father what had happened in kindergarten, especially that teacher Shen had taught them how to dance. Chi-Chi learned the best. She said that her mother knew how to dance and that she had learned it before. Then I also danced very well. Teacher Mu also praised me. She said with a smile, as if she was waiting for her father's praise. Really? Tonight you must dance for Dad. Dad thinks that our Shishi's legs are so long that you should be very good at dancing. Yang Yi smiled and said to Shishi. The little girl was happier than anything else when she got her father's approval. She smiled sweetly and said, okay, then I will dance for Papa when we get home. It's a pity that your mother is not at home. She can't watch. Yang Yi said casually. We can go to Mom's workplace. I used to ask Auntie Shawan to take me there when I miss Mom at night. She said excitedly. Yang Yi pondered for a moment and nodded. That's a good idea. After dinner, Dad will take you there. You can dance for Mom and Dad to see. That's great. I can see Mom again. The little girl clapped her hands happily. While Yang Yi was preparing dinner, Shishi ran into the kitchen with little sweetheart in her arms. Xiao Guai actually felt a little uncomfortable being hugged by its little master, but it had no choice. She hadn't seen Xiao Guai for a whole day, and Shishi liked to be intimate with it. Are you sure it's not rape? Papa, I have a question to ask you. Shishi stood at the door, trying her best to hug Xiao Guai's stomach with her left hand while raising her right hand high. In kindergarten, the little guy had also become very polite. Yang Yi turned down the fire, put the lid on the pot, and let the braised fish simmer. Then he turned around and said with a smile, Go ahead. Papa, can I invite my friends to play at home? Shishi looked at her father expectantly and asked. It turned out that when Shishi told her friends in kindergarten that she had 3 kittens at home, her friends were all very envious. I also have a dog at home, a big dog. Chen Shiyin still liked to pull the topic to herself, but obviously, kittens were much more attractive than big dogs. Okay. Chun Shuryan saw that other people's attention was still on Shishi, so she shook her head disappointedly and continued to talk about kittens with her friends. Shishi, why don't we go to your house to see your kittens? Unexpectedly, Chun Shuryan's suggestion was unanimously supported by her friends. Seeing that the center of attention was on her again, Chun Shuryan thought of something and said proudly, "It would be great to go to Shishi's house to play. Shishi's father cooks delicious food. Let him make barbecue for us. I also want to eat roasted cotton candy." "I want to eat it too," Lon Xian drooled and couldn't help but say. Her friends all looked at Shishi with shining eyes, hoping that she could give them an answer. "I'll tell them that I'll come back and ask Papa." Shishi took Yang Yi's hand and said coquettishly, "Is that okay? Is that okay?" Yang Yi smiled and pinched the little girl's nose and said, "Of course, it's a good thing that you invited your friends to play at home. Papa will also prepare a lot of delicious food for you." "Papa, you're so nice." The little girl smiled sweetly. "But you have to count how many friends you have at home, and when will they come?" Yang Yi smiled and gave the little girl a task. "Papa has to contact their parents and tell them our home address." "Okay." Cece happily ran out with little Guai in her arms. In the evening, Yang Yi drove Shishi to Tianmei Company. He had contacted Murphy in advance, and Mo Shawan was waiting downstairs early. She guided him to the underground parking lot, and then went upstairs through the internal elevator. "Does Murphy usually work overtime so late?" Yang Yi asked casually in order to ease the quiet atmosphere in the elevator. Mo Shawan yawned and said lazily, "Yes, she wants to release her new album as soon as possible, so she records songs day and night. Our producer has already gone back, but she's still not satisfied and feels that she needs to find a new state." "Okay," Yang Yi responded. Then he didn't say anything else. The elevator fell into silence. Shishi, on the other hand, was holding a teddy bear in her left hand and 2 roses wrapped in plastic paper in her right hand. She was jumping up and down happily, because she was going to see her mother soon. Yang Yi suddenly thought of the teddy bear and the roses on the way. He stopped the car and bought them at the roadside flower shop. Why did he only buy 2 flowers? Because if there were too many flowers with Murphy's character, she would probably find a vase to put them in. 2 flowers were just right, one for him, one for Shishi, and one for Murphy. As for the teddy bear, Shishi saw that there was one in a special bouquet of roses and clamored for it. Yang Yi paid more money and persuaded the shop assistant to take it out for the little girl. After a while, they arrived at Murphy's recording studio, which was on the floor of her office. Shishi ran first and threw herself into the arms of Murphy, who had just stood up from the chair, and called sweetly, "Mom!" The little girl couldn't wait to reach out her 2 small hands and offer the gift. "Mom, look, this is what I and Papa bought for you. This teddy bear is mine, and the flowers are mine and Papa's." Murphy also smiled and kissed the little girl's face. Her voice was slightly hoarse, probably because she had practiced for a long time today. "Shishi is so good. Mom likes your gift very much. Do you still want to practice today?" Yang Yi waited for the mother and daughter to be intimate before he asked with concern, "Do you want to take a break? I think your voice is a little weak. You need to take a break. No matter how anxious you are, you can't overwork yourself." Yang Yi was rarely so long-winded, except when he was talking to Shishi. Murphy listened and felt warm in her heart. However, she wasn't good at showing that she was moved, so she pouted and said, "I know, Uncle who likes to care about this and that." Mo Shawan, who was next to them, felt sick for a while. She shook as if she couldn't stand it and muttered in her heart, "Do I not want to be a third wheel here? I feel so full." Chapter 192. Fortunately, Murphy and Yang Yi did not get too intimate because of Shishi's presence. Instead, they focused on Shishi and let Shishi talk about her childhood in kindergarten. Chun Shuryan said that her papa is a boxer, and he's amazing. She also knows how to box. The little girl felt that this was particularly strange. Although she did not know much about boxing, Chun Shuryan had performed it before, and it looked very impressive. A girl practicing boxing? Murphy felt a little incredulous. Yang Yi reminded her, Don't be fooled by Chen Shiyun's quiet and elegant name. In fact, she's a very tall and strong girl. I've seen her father before. He's a boxing coach at the fitness center. Yes, she's very strong. She admired her a little. Even so, girls shouldn't practice boxing. It's too scary, Murphy said. Yang Yi agreed with Murphy's point of view. He smiled and said, yes, boxing is not good. I don't want Shi to be like her and grow muscles. Murphy patted Yang Yi's forearm unhappily and said angrily, you're still talking about it. I don't even know who allowed his daughter to practice swordsmanship. Yang Yi complained. What's wrong with practicing swordsmanship? It won't grow muscles, and it can also exercise the body's flexibility. Mo Xiaowan looked at them from the side and whispered, sister, didn't you say on the phone that Shi was going to dance for you? Yes, dance. Murphy also remembered. Okay. In front of her parents, Shi was particularly eager to show off. She immediately jumped down from the sofa with joy. I almost forgot. After the little girl jumped down, she seemed to have thought of something and ran back to her father. She pulled her father's big hand and said, Papa, you have to help me clap and shout 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. What clapping? This was a beat. Yang Yi patiently let his daughter teach him how to make the beat. Then, he followed the little girl's request and gently clapped his hands, shouting, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Not yet. You have to let me stand like this. The little girl had a lot of demands, but Yang Yi, Murphy, and the others were not impatient at all. Instead, they found it very interesting. She saw Shi standing in the middle of the empty space. The coffee table had been moved away. She raised her left arm and her right hand horizontally. Then, she stood on her tiptoes. It's not bad. Mo Xiaowan covered her mouth and chuckled. Is it okay now? Yang Yi asked with concern. Shi's little face was taut, and she looked especially serious. She couldn't speak while standing on her tiptoes, so she could only use her nose to make noises. Okay, come on. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yang Yi clapped his hands and slowly counted the beat. Under the gaze of the three adults, Shi really began to dance. It was a bit like a swan dance, but she only needed to stand on her tiptoes at the beginning. After that, she basically walked steadily on the ground. Her movements were mainly focused on her hands. Shi's two small arms hugged together for a while, and then she spread them out for a while. Sometimes, she would dance up and down like a swan. Although they hadn't seen the original version, Yang Yi and Murphy both felt that Shi's gestures were very beautiful, but her steps were a little messy. They guessed that she was too busy learning the gestures and neglected the steps. But it was already amazing enough. She was only 4 years old, but she could already dance so well in less than a day's time. Of course, she didn't dance for too long, only about 10 or 20 seconds. After the little girl finished dancing, she happily hugged her and jumped into her mother's arms. Murphy hugged her daughter and kissed her tender little face. She smiled and said, You dance so well. Shi must be the best in class. Shi was a little embarrassed by her mother's praise, but she still shook her head honestly and said, No, Chi is the best. Chi is another girl in her class. She's gentle and quiet, and her surname is also Yang. Yang Yi reminded her as usual. I know that. She's Yang Luoqi. Murphy rolled her eyes at Yang Yi, then hugged the little girl and said proudly, Shi told me before. There's a girl who can dance better than our Shi? That's impossible, right? Mo Xiaowan smiled and reached out to tease Shi's chin. It's true. Chi said that her mom can dance, and she learned it before. The little girl explained seriously. Murphy rubbed Shi's little head lovingly and said with a smile, Your mom can sing and dance a little. Shi, why don't you learn from mom? Looking at other people's children, some of them could box, some of them could dance. They were all greatly influenced by their families. Mo Fei even regretted that she spoiled Cici too much, and didn't let her learn to sing from an early age. Mom can dance too? The little girl's attention was diverted. In her memory, she had never seen her mother dance before. Yang Yi didn't either. He looked at Murphy with some surprise and asked, You can dance? Yang Yi's doubts made Mo Xiaowan a little unhappy. She said righteously, What's so strange about that? Sister Faye practiced dancing in the early years, okay? It's just that the company positioned Sister Faye as a pure singer, not a singer who sings and dances, so there's no place for her to use. Murphy pulled Mo Xiaojuan's hand and asked her to stop bragging. Actually, it's because I can't sing and dance at the same time. I can't keep up with the rhythm, Murphy said to Yang Yi. And I don't like this style of song very much. So that's the case. However, after being changed the topic, Murphy forgot about her intention to teach Shishi skills. It's time to go back and rest. Shishi began to yawn. Children all went to bed early. Mo Xiaowan was supposed to send Murphy home, but since Yang Yi came today, Mo Xiaowan drove directly to her place and left Murphy to Yang Yi. Before leaving, Mo Xiaowan smirked and said, "Anyway, he's your man. Let him do something." Yang Yi took Shishi's little hand, smiled at Murphy and said, "Let's go. I'll take you back." Shishi yawned again. The little girl was attacked by sleepiness and asked in a daze, "Papa, are we going back to Mom's house to sleep?" Yang Yi was stunned for a moment and turned to look at Murphy. Murphy's beautiful eyes reflected the light, but she was full of shyness, which made Yang Yi's heart beat faster. "But Shishi, you still have to go to school tomorrow. Leave your school bag and other things at Dad's house." Yang Yi was a little hesitant. It wasn't that he had any scruples. Last weekend, Murphy's relatives had already left. The two of them were in love and were at the age of dry wood and fire, so they had already spent a night together. Moreover, this thing was tasty. However, considering that Shishi had to go to kindergarten and Murphy's mental fatigue, Yang Yi was a little hesitant. When Tyrant slowly stopped at Murphy's house, the tired little girl had already fallen asleep in the back seat. Murphy hesitated and didn't have any intention of getting out of the car. Seeing Yang Yi turn his head and look at her, Murphy gently bit her lower lip. Under the yellow light of the car, the beauty was tender and beautiful like a peach blossom. After a long time, Yang Yi heard her say in a very small voice, "Actually, in your house there are still clothes for me to change into." Yang Yi immediately understood the meaning of this sentence. He was a little wild with joy and asked, "Then I'll take Shishi to kindergarten tomorrow, and then I'll take you to the company?" Mo Fei's shyness was so low that it was almost inaudible. You're tuning into the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.